Chapter 127, The Burial Site. Chapter 127, The Burial Site. Corpse slaves. Shi Yang scowled. These slaved corpses belong to the corpse sect. The corpse sect and yin-yang wonderland are very close, as both the forces hail from the tutor sea. In the corpse sect, disciples control corpses to fight, and they are also experts in corpse refinement. The martial skills they cultivate are almost entirely related to controlling of corpses. Xia Xinyan frowned, her eyes full of disgust. The disciples from this sect are able to control more corpses as they advance to higher cultivation levels. A disaster realm warrior's corpse, through the refining of the corpse sect, could become even more frightening than when they were alive. These corpses are all corpse slaves from the corpse sect. Yes, but these corpses have not yet been refined into slaves. These corpses have only been preserved from decaying by using the most simple methods. But once they go through the corpse sect's refining, these corpses will become very frightening. Some corpses, that have gone through thousands of years of refining, have astonishing powers. Their bodies are impenetrable, and they can even use the power of the 5 elements. They are the finest weapons of the corpse sect. Shi Yang's heart shook and his expression darkened even more. The yin-yang wonderland will collect these corpses along the way, while they collect medicinal ingredients. This time, the yin-yang wonderland should be sending these corpses to a burial site of the corpse sect. It seems that we will be going to a burial site. Burial site. A burial site is where the corpse sect refine their corpses. In the endless sea, the corpse sect has hundreds of burial sites. In each burial site, there are many corpse slaves. When the corpse sect disciples fight, and their corpses get destroyed, they will come to a burial site to choose a new corpse, in order to regain their combat power. Some core disciples can get very strong corpse slaves. The corpse slaves that have been refined in the burial site for hundreds of years are very powerful and aggressive in combat. How many corpse slaves can a disciple from the corpse sect control? It depends on their cultivation realm, and also on the level of the corpse slaves. The corpse slaves under 100 years of refining are called mortal corpses. Over 100 years and they would be called earth corpses. Over 1,000 years they would be called sky corpses. And a 10,000-year-old corpse would be called a corpse king. Mortal corpses are mediocre. They can only use 30% of the power that the corpse had when it was alive. A 100-year-old earth corpse can use 100% of its power it had before it died. A 1,000-year-old sky corpse can use 120% of its power, and the 10,000-year-old corpse king is the most frightening. They are said to be able to use twice the amount of power they had when they were alive. They also know how to use the power of the 5 element. A corpse king that knows how to use the power of the 5 elements, this is equivalent to having 5 martial spirit. Mortal corpse, earth corpse, sky corpse, and corpse king. Shi Yang's expression changed. In the corpse sect, how many corpse kings are there? I don't know. It said that they only have 1 or 2, but those 2 corpse kings were all sky realm masters when they were alive. I heard that the leader of the corpse sect fought with a god realm master, and by simply using that one corpse king, he was able to make that god realm master miserable. That corpse king was made from a dead sky realm master, yet it was comparable to a god realm master. It's truly frightening. Amazing. Shi Yang's expression was aghast. It truly is amazing. Xia Xinyan's expression was serious. These corpse slaves play a huge part in making the corpse sect one of the 15 forces of the endless sea. When the followers of the corpse sect bring corpse slaves to a fight, it's like they have a few extra lives. When they fight with others, all they have to do is hide on the side and control the corpse slaves. Just by using their corpse slaves, they can wear down their opponents. Burial site. I hope this time the Yin-Yang Wonderland's ships won't stop at a burial site first. A creepy place like that, it's better if we steer clear of it. Shi Yang smiled wryly. It's not up to you and me. Xia Xinyan sighed faintly. We should be careful. If we see any other ships over the next few days, we'll leave immediately. I don't want to stay in this shitty place any longer than I have to. I'll seal the trunks again. Shi Yang nodded. He performed his finger spear again, and pressed down on those dugout steel nails. In a moment, Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan were sitting in their room again. After the two knew that this level was filled with corpses, their expressions were not that pretty. Especially Xia Xinyan, she felt uncomfortable all over. Then, after a while, she finally breathed evenly again, and entered into the cultivation mindset. Shi Yang furrowed his brows, he took a deep breath in, and closed his eyes to go into vigorous cultivation. There was no conversation for the rest of the night. The next morning, Shi Yang continued to carry the flower pots onto the deck. Xia Xinyan followed him, as she didn't want to stay alone in the lower level. On the deck, Li Wei and a bunch of Yin-Yang Wonderland disciples maliciously stared at the two. There were sneers on their lips, God knows what they were thinking about. Shi Yang pretended like he didn't see it. He minded his own business but secretly was on the lookout. Unexpectedly, Li Wei and the bunch didn't come up to make trouble. They only glared at them in the distance, as if they already had some plan. Shi Yang was silent, but he secretly paid attention to Li Wei and his group. He gazed into the distance of the deck, looking for an opportunity to leave. Before the sun set, he carried those flower pots back down to the lower level again. Xiao Feng came on time, and brought up the food and fresh water for the two. Ungrateful. After dropping off the stuff, Xiao Feng murmured under her breath, and left looking unfriendly. This time, the food was no longer generous, it was still salted fish and steamed bread, the fresh water was only enough for daily drinking. Shi Yang already expected this outcome. He didn't take it to heart, so he ignored Xiao Feng. Time passed quickly, the sun repeatedly rose and set. Every morning, Shi Yang would wake up and carry all the flower pots up to the deck, then help Xia Xinyan clean up the trash. Before the sun set, he would carry those flower pots back to their original place, and receive the salted fish and steamed bread. At night, he would chat with Xia Xinyan about the endless sea, then he'd close his eyes and cultivate. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. Xia Xinyan's power had recovered a lot, and the profound qi in her body was already as vigorous as a human realm warrior's. Although she couldn't use the reincarnation martial spirit, she could now defend herself a little. Shi Yang hadn't been idle either. Over the course of this month, although he didn't cultivate the skill, he did ponder about the possibilities of cultivating the second sky of rampage. He tried to find a method to merge the negative energies into his blood, and somewhat gained a little insight. But he didn't cultivate on the ship. Cultivating the rampage martial skill would need to stir the negative energies. And after every cultivation, his body would be very worn out. On the ship, there were many unpredictable dangers. Although that Li Wei didn't make a move, Shi Yang still couldn't let down his guard. He always maintained his peak condition, and made preparations to leave the ship at any time. Late at night, Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan meditated in that cramped room with their eyes closed. Suddenly, the speed of the iron ship slowed down. Shi Yang immediately opened his eyes, and alerted Xia Xinyan, "It seems like the ship is stopping, we should be more careful now." Xia Xinyan's long eyelashes flickered, and her bright eyes opened. She spoke indifferently, "Use your black formula to sense around a bit, look if there's any strong body of yin qi nearby. Remember, don't completely perform the black formula, so as not to cause a big change. At that time, if you or I attract attention, we'll be dead for sure." "Okay." Shi Yang nodded. Recently, Shi Yang had learned many secrets of the endless sea from Xia Xinyan. He had also learned a bit about the mysteries of the black formula. The black formula was a special martial spirit that nourished the silver moon martial spirit and the star martial spirit of the three gods sect. Like the light formula, it was a forbidden power that was not passed down. The light formula was very similar to the black formula, but it needed to gather vigorous yang qi in order to be cultivated. It could nourish the sun martial spirit. Only the three gods, the elders, and the godchildren of the three god sect were qualified to peek into the profoundness of the light formula and the dark formula. It was said that with the assistance of the light and dark formulas, the three martial spirits of the three gods sect could reach different levels of growth. Although the black formula was just a mortal level martial skill, if the natural yin qi absorbed becomes enough, it could even reach the strength of profound and spirit level martial spirits. If the black formula absorbs the endless natural yin qi, it could even reach the level of sacred martial skills. Like Xia Xinyan said, the black formula was one of the only martial skills that could evolve, it had endless possibilities. Of course, It required one to have enough natural yin-qi to absorb. This condition seemed simple, but it was actually very hard to achieve. There were not many places with natural yin-qi. In the endless sea, any places that had natural yin-qi had long been wiped clean by the Three Gods sect. So even though the black formula seemed amazing, it was truly hard to evolve. The burial site of the corpse sect was a strange area where death qi and corpse qi were mixed. In the death qi and corpse qi, there was often some yin qi mixed within. That yin qi came from the depths of the earth and seeped out of the corpse slaves. The amount of it was very little, but it was enough for Shi Yang to notice. Xia Xinyan told him to circulate the black formula and search around, just to know if the landing spot of this iron ship was a burial site of the corpse sect. There is yin qi. Shi Yang's expression changed. The yin qi is separated into wisps and spread to every corner of the island. The landing location of the ship is a burial site of the corpse sect. It's just as we feared. Fuck. Let's wait and see. If there really is danger, then we'll just jump into the sea to escape. Xia Xinyan sighed. I just hope that there are no Sky Realm warriors in the burial site. I also hope that there are no water corpses, or else we will have no chances to escape. A water corpse is formed when the corpse sect uses special methods to refine the corpse slave, sinking it into the sea, and using the whirlpools under the sea to gather corpse qi. After being thoroughly tempered, the water corpse would become like a fish. It could freely swim around in the sea. Although it wasn't like a corpse king, who could arbitrarily control the water currents, the water corpse was still quite extraordinary. But this kind of corpse slaves had a fatal flaw. Although water corpses were powerful in the water, if they touched fire, their strength would severely decrease. These corpse slaves did have a special use, yet they also had a far too obvious flaw. Which was why the corpse sect wouldn't put too much effort into refining this kind of corpse slave. Corpse slaves with special uses were in the minority, as they were only refined by the corpse sect to extract ores from special mines and medicinal ingredients in special areas. Bang! The sound of the anchor dropping into the water suddenly came from outside. Soon, that Xiao Feng appeared in the staircase. She said indifferently, "You two can come down now, we've arrived at our destination." In Xiao Feng's cold eyes, there was also a hint of pity. Xia Xinyan's mind was very sensitive. She only looked at Xiao Feng once, but her heart had already begun to sink. She realized something was very wrong. "Hihi, you two can come out now. I'll expose you to some interesting knowledge." In the staircase, Li Wei also poked his head out and sneered. Burial sites are very famous in the endless sea, but normal people would never get a chance to step in. You guys got lucky. Now you can experience a burial site of the corpse sect for yourselves. He. Edited by Jimmy and Eli. Chapter 128 Live On. Chapter 128 Live On. At the bottom of the iron ship. Disciples from the Yin-Yang Wonderland came down and carried the wooden boxes to the deck, preparing to pass them over to the burial site. The 32 wooden boxes, which were nailed shut, contained cold corpses. In the wooden boxes, there were also cold heavy stones, thus disciples of the Yin-Yang Wonderland needed to carry it in groups of 2 or 3. Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan walked out of the small room and headed to the deck, gloomy expressions on their faces. On the deck, Shi Yang looked out, and found that the ship had stopped at an island, which was as big as a city, dull, and covered with odd plants. Heavy corpse qi meandered underneath the island. There were hundreds of burial sites on the island, each with a cave that led to the center of that site. Some of those burial sites were as big as basketball courts, and some were like small rooms. Long deep gullies ran between the burial sites, which were filled with odd materials, and filled with white smoke. Hundreds of burial sites were connected by the gullies. The island looked like a huge spiderweb, and the gullies were the spider silk. Beside the burial sites and gullies were boundless grey plants, which were ghastly and depressing. At the center of the island sat the biggest burial site, which stone towers with gloomy disciples of the corpse sect standing on top of them. The disciples of the corpse sect were at human, disaster, and earth realms, and were walking from the stone towers to the burial sites in silence. Disciples of the corpse sect were sent to the entrances of those burial sites, and some were carrying cold stones and poisonous insects. They were throwing odd materials into the gullies. The whole island was covered in a ghastly atmosphere. Tombs, evil plants, and gloomy disciples of the corpse sect. Those disciples of the yin-yang wonderland were busy carrying wooden boxes off the ship. Dozens of corpse sect disciples opened those wooden boxes, one of them writing something down on a book, recording those corpses' information. The disciples of the yin-yang wonderland were cooperative, explaining to the disciples of the corpse sect about the corpses. The female disciples of the yin-yang wonderland were quite careful as they arrived, and looked unnatural while talking to corpse sect disciples. Li Zhuang and Zhu Yueru, the priests of the yin-yang wonderland, had also disembarked from the ship. They were standing beside the boxes, and talking to a warrior from the corpse sect. Shi Yang and Xia Xinyang stood on the deck, wearing strange faces. Priest Zhu had a good impression of you. She still wants you to be her disciple if you are okay with it. Standing beside Shi Yang, Xiao Feng tried to persuade him, once you nod, I will tell Priest Zhu, okay? Shi Yang frowned and took a glance at Zhu Yueru who stood far away, and shook his head, sorry, I don't want to join the yin-yang wonderland. Xiao Feng turned gloomy and she said coldly, you will regret this. Hey you two, get off the ship. What are you waiting for? Li Wei had gotten off the ship, and he sneered, we will stay here for 1 day, and no strangers can stay on the ship. Shi Yang frowned, glanced at Xia Xinyan and said, let's get off. He had to obey them now. Xia Xinyan was quite calm and, though filled with disgust, she got off the ship with Shi Yang. Li Zhuang and Zhu Yueru, the two priests of the yin-yang wonderland, kept looking at Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan while talking to the warrior of the corpse sect. That long-faced warrior of the corpse sect also looked to Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan casually, seeming to come to a certain agreement with Li Zhuang and Zhu Yueru. The three discussed for a while and nodded, satisfied about something. Before long, Li Zhuang said loudly, we will rest here for 3 days, and then we will leave on our ship. Priest Li, can we stay on the ship? A female disciple pleaded miserably. No. Li Zhuang grunted and stared at them coldly, you have a long way to go. You can't develop your martial arts if you are so timid. You have to steel yourselves. Tonight, the corpse sect disciples will take you to visit those corpse slaves. Seize the opportunity, it is rare for people from the endless sea have a chance to visit. Many disciples of the yin-yang wonderland were frightened, and their lips trembled. Disciples of the corpse sect showed contempt in their eyes, and took out small rings from their waist and shook them. Disciples of the yin-yang wonderland screamed again. With the rings, corpses in white gowns appeared. Those corpses seemed blind and clumsy as they walked in this direction. These are human corpses. They have not been refined for long, so their limbs are stiff. What are you afraid of? One corpse sect disciple glanced coldly at those screaming disciples of the yin-yang wonderland. Corpse slaves are our best friends. They won't betray us. Those human corpses moved slowly and carried the wooden boxes to a burial site. Under the moonlight, corpse slaves were wobbling with corpse chi around them, pale and frightening. Shi Yang frowned, watching the corpses being carried away by the corpse sect disciples. You too. Li Zhuang pointed at Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan, go to the burial site as well. Li Zhuang never took Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan seriously. He continued to discuss with the corpse sect member. Zhu Yueru also glanced at Shi Yang and frowned slightly, then continued to talk with the corpse sect member. They three were negotiating the price of the corpses. Shi Yang stretched out to grab Xia Xinyan, and said in a low voice, let's leave now, the further the better. We can't. Xia Xinyan shook her head, there are water corpses. How do you know? Shi Yang's expression changed, as he looked around with his bright eyes. There are at least 3 burial sites refining water corpses, which can dive deep into the sea. We will be caught by them even if we leave now. Xia Xinyan said softly. Then what should we do? Let's go the burial site first, then kill those water corpses and leave. Okay. Li Wei kept a distance from Shi Yang, but observed him carefully. You two, go. Let's have a look at their refining skill. The corpse sect can not only refine dead bodies, but also live corpses. You know what is a live corpse? It means refining a living human to be a corpse. It's very interesting, maybe you two will get to see it. Li Wei smiled cunningly. Shi Yang's expression changed, and he quickly understood Li Zhuang, and realized why Li Zhuang looked back to him while talking to that corpse sect disciple. Li Zhuang had sold them to the corpse sect as material for refining live corpses. Xia Xinyan's eyes were cold, as she bit her lips and showed indignation. "We can't separate." Shi Yang grabbed her hand tightly and said firmly, "We can find a chance, as long as we are alive." Hearing that, Xia Xinyan suddenly felt safe. "Okay." Xia Xinyan nodded softly. For the first time, she responded to Shi Yang's hand, "Remember, live on." Shi Yang felt flattered as he said happily, "Don't worry, we will survive. If we can survive, I will forgive your rudeness, and go peacefully with you." Xia Xinyan hesitated and said softly, "We will definitely leave here alive." Edited by Eli. Chapter 129, Two Sky Corpses. Chapter 129, Two Sky Corpses. Numerous graves were spread around on the island burial site. In the middle of the island stood many stone towers. In the center of these towers was a giant grave which had 3 open holes, each directly leading into the depths of the grave. Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan followed behind the corpse sect and Yin Yang Wonderland disciples. They came across many graves along the way, and arrived at the center of the island. Inside the surrounding stone towers, there were a number of Yin Yang Wonderland disciples. These towers were also occupied by disciples of the corpse sect, who were all responsible for finding favorable positions for refining the corpses in the nearby graves. The 2 priests from the Yin Yang Wonderland, Li Zhuang and Zhu Yueru, arrived at one of the stone towers with the Earth Realm warrior from the corpse sect. They seemed to be discussing payment. Li Wei was busy mingling with some corpse sect disciples, who were all in the disaster realm. They stood next to the 2 Yin Yang Wonderland's Earth Realm warriors and coldly stared at Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan. Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan were temporarily assigned to a room in one of the stone towers. There were no windows inside the room, only a stone door. Outside the door, a few strong warriors from the Yin Yang Wonderland and the corpse sect were secretly guarding the room. A few corpse sect disciples went to the central graveyard, going about some important matters. Others were busy in carrying out pieces of strange rocks from the stone towers. There were also a variety of strange and creepy-shaped wooden pieces, and some bottles containing poisonous insects. The disciples of the corpse sect seemed to be busy preparing the ingredients for refining the corpses. Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan didn't know about the outside movements, they only knew that they were temporarily in captivity. In the stone room, Shi Yang's face was calm, but his eyes were cold, and constantly on guard. With some kind of method, Xia Xinyan seemed to know that there were water corpses hidden in 3 of the graves on this burial site. According to what she said, the water corpses would become very strong in water. But on land, they would be very easy to destroy. As long as they could be wrapped in flames, the bodies of these water corpses would easily melt. The water corpses were not like the 10,000-year-old corpse kings. The corpse kings could use the powers of the 5 elements, they could even control water to extinguish fire, plus they also have the power to control fire within them. The corpse king was the most special and the most powerful corpse slave. The water corpses could only swim in the water, they didn't have the power to control the water, plus they were extremely weak to flames. On the way here, Xia Xinyan had already secretly pointed out to Shi Yang the 3 graves that hid water slaves. Shi Yang took note of it in his mind as he was waiting for an opportunity. Once the opportunity arrived, he definitely would take care of the water corpses buried in the 3 graves first. Then they would finally be able to go into the sea without worries. Late at night, in the different graves of the burial site, there often came frightening shrieks. The Yin Yang Wonderland disciples that went with the corpse sect followers to look around in the graves were mostly first-timers. In the silent night against creepy, terrifying corpse slaves, of course many would get scared and scream. Shrieks came from the graves in different areas. In a silent night like this, that kind of chilling scream was pretty scary in itself. Once someone started screaming, it caused a chain reaction. When the Yin Yang Wonderland disciples from other graves heard someone else's scream, they would scream with fear too. In a moment, occasional shrieks and howls started coming from the island. Shi Yang's expression was indifferent. With furrowed brows he listened to the screams nearby. Through the screams, he could determine in which direction there were more Yin-Yang Wonderland disciples. Shi Yang kept calculating in his mind. He calculated which direction would be the easiest to escape to, if he were really to do it. You two can come out now. Around midnight, Li Wei's voice came from outside. Shi Yang sneered in his mind as he walked out of the stone door with Xia Xinyan. After glancing at the Yin-Yang Wonderland and Corpse Sect disciples at the door, he said lightly, Li Wei, what are you trying to do? The ingredients for refining a live corpse are ready, we'll lead you to go see it. Li Wei's eyes were filled with malice, but when saying these words, he was very excited as he subconsciously rubbed his hands, as if he couldn't wait a moment longer. Shi Yang's expression shifted slightly as he said, we are not interested in viewing the process of refining live corpses. If you're interested, you can go by yourself. That's not up to you. Li Wei sneered and snorted, you have to go no matter what. Take them. The two Earth Realm warriors from Yin-Yang Wonderland stood on both sides of Shi Yang. 5 Disaster Realm disciples from the Corpse Sect also walked forward. Their eyes were full of wickedness, they seemed to also look forward to the upcoming live corpse refining process very much. 2 Earth Realm warriors, 3 Disaster Realm disciples from the Corpse Sect, plus Li Wei. This amount of power was already very hard to deal with, plus in the nearby stone towers, there were also the Nirvana Realm warriors, Li Zhuang and Zhu Yueru. If they start fighting here, then Li Zhuang and Zhu Yueru would definitely come out of the stone tower. At that time, it would be extremely difficult for Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan to escape this disaster. After quickly weighing his options, Shi Yang suddenly grinned, then we might as well go take a look. Lead the way. The 5 Corpse Sect disciples looked indifferent, there were no special emotions on their faces. They slowly walked towards one of the holes in the middle of the stone towers. Get in. Li Wei stood next to those 2 Earth Realm warriors, and shouted with a stern voice. Shi Yang felt cold inside, his eyes rolled over Li Wei. He took a deep breath in, and slowly followed along. This was a giant underground tomb. The tomb was very large, and had many stone chambers. There were many coffins displayed in the middle of those stone chambers. The coffins were designed very peculiarly, with many iron pipes reaching out of the stone walls and inserting into those coffins. Every coffin had 5 or 6 pipes, which were as thick as a man's arm, stuck on them. One end of the iron pipes went into the coffins, and the other end went into the stone walls. Strange death chi and corpse chi filled the iron pipes, and this chi was slowly moving through them. These coffins were like chi transportation hubs. They transferred the strange powers in the gullies to the coffins through these iron pipes, which provided enough power for the corpse slaves. In the underground grave, there were possibly more than 20 of these different-sized stone rooms. In every stone room, there were 3 or 4 coffins, and in every coffin there was a corpse slave. In the middle of the grave lay the biggest stone room. This one was twice as big as the others, but there were only 2 coffins in the middle. Those 2 coffins were also twice as big as other normal coffins. There were many iron pipes sticking into it. A mix of death chi and corpse chi flowed into those 2 coffins through the iron pipes. After Shi Yang came down, his expression immediately changed just after one glance at the 2 coffins. In other coffins, there wasn't a single trace of fluctuation, as the corpse slaves didn't have auras. Yet, in those 2 giant coffins in the middle, there was the slight fluctuation of an aura. The corpse slaves in those 2 coffins didn't seem to be mindless. It looked like they had the ability to think. Sky corpses. Shi Yang was shocked inside. According to what Xia Xinyan said, 1,000-year-old sky corpses were stronger than they were before they died. Plus, they had a simple consciousness, and the instinct to wake up and fight. When fighting with others, they even understand how to pick the right martial skill to fight their enemies. They could use their martial skills better than when they were alive. Usually, every 1,000-year-old sky corpse was at least a Nirvana Realm warrior before they died. Only for dead Nirvana Realm warriors would the Corpse Sect go to such great extents to make them into sky corpses. Sky corpses were very precious, and only important figures in the Corpse Sect would be qualified to own a sky corpse. Every sky corpse is recorded in the Corpse Sect. If an important figure in the corpse sect wanted to obtain a sky corpse, they would have to get the permission of the sect leader to become an owner of a sky corpse. 2 sky corpses. Shi Yang stared at the 2 coffins, and complained in his mind. He felt like it would probably be extremely hard to escape from this disaster this time. It's right here. The disciples of the corpse sect led Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan into one of the stone chambers next to the 2 sky corpses. In that stone chamber was an empty coffin. The coffin seemed to have been filled with different kinds of corpse refining material. 12 iron pipes were inserted into that one coffin, and vigorous corpse chi and death chi kept flowing out of the coffin, giving off an extremely evil aura. Why don't you get in? A corpse sect follower coldly looked at Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan, urging them to enter the coffin. Crack! Shi Yang abruptly crashed into Li Wei's arms, and the sound of breaking bones resounded through the air. 3 gravitational fields quickly shifted. Separately they trapped the 2 Earth Realm warriors of Yin-Yang Wonderland. Another gravitational field dragged 3 corpse sect followers into it. These 3 secretly released gravitational fields were formed by mixing profound qi and yin qi. Shi Yang had prepared it when they entered the tomb. Originally he wanted to find the right opportunity to attack, but now there was no room for him to maneuver. The opponents already prepared to refine them into live corpses. In frustration, Shi Yang was forced to attack. You're dead. The expression of the remaining 2 corpse sect disciples changed. They suddenly took out bells from their pockets, and lightly shook them. In the 2 stone chambers in the distance, 7 coffins were broken by corpse slaved from the inside. The 7 ghastly pale corpse slaves suddenly sat up from inside the coffins. They quickly got out of the coffins, and lifelessly came towards Shi Yang. Be careful! Xia Xinyan exclaimed. She opened her mouth and spit out a colorful light. That colorful light was a small dagger. It overflowed with light. Like a shooting star, it suddenly shot towards those 2 corpse sect disciples which were not bound by the gravitational fields. You should be careful too. Shi Yang's expression was merciless. He suddenly roared. A flow of violent, desperate, insane, and murderous evil intents suddenly poured out of Shi Yang's body. In a mere moment, Shi Yang's whole body was covered with white fog. He had activated the negative powers. In the tearing pain, the power in Shi Yang's body increased drastically. His eyes were filled with endless feelings of violence and fear. His expression was ferocious, but he was cool-headed as ever. Wisps of negative energies flowed into the 3 gravitational fields. It doubled the power of the gravitational fields. The 3 disaster realm disciples from the corpse sect were in extreme pain inside the gravitational fields. Blood unceasingly bled out of their bodies. In the gravitational field mixed with 3 kinds of powers, the bodies of 2 Earth Realm warriors from Yin-Yang Wonderland were suddenly covered in layers of red and white light. The power of the gravitational field could only bind the 2, and it was unable to hurt their bodies. You want to make me into a living corpse? I'll turn you into a dead corpse right now. Shi Yang's expression was merciless. After activating the negative powers, he seemed to have turned into a bloodthirsty beast. He suddenly sprinted towards the terrified-looking Li Wei. Bang! Li Wei was struck into the air, and, before he fell to the ground, he had already died. Shi Yang didn't even look at Li Wei's corpse. He suddenly turned around and quickly sprinted towards the 2 corpse sect disciples that were opposing Xia Xinyan. Woo-woo! Woo-woo! One of the corpse sect disciples had a terrified expression. He quickly swallowed the bell in his hand, and suddenly started yelling out loud. Crack, crack! The coffins holding the sky corpses suddenly released a strange sound. The thick wooden planks on top of the coffin moved to the side. 2 flows of extremely evil corpse chi suddenly rushed out of them. They looked like a pale grey smoke as wreathed the top of the coffin, giving off an evil and creepy aura. Dash. Edited by Eli, Jimmy, and Vic. Chapter 130, The Mutation of Life and Death. Chapter 130, The Mutation of Life and Death. In the underground tomb. In the 2 big coffins of the biggest stone chamber, the 2 sky corpses slowly sat up. A flow of fierce and brutal corpse chi spread out through the entirety of the underground tomb. These 2 sky corpses were a man and a woman. Both were in their 40s, and their complexions were extremely pale and there were wrinkles all over their bodies. The two sky corpses were in the Nirvana realm, and the corpse chi, which was wafting around their bodies, gave chills to anyone who saw it. The sky corpses sat up, their pale grey eyes slowly rolled around, and they looked at Shi Yang while sitting inside the coffin. The male sky corpse slowly stood up, opened his mouth, and breathed out a white light made of corpse chi. The white light flew out and exploded in front of him. It split up into tiny streaks of light and shot towards the coffins in the nearby stone chambers. Those white lights seemed to have awakened the corpse slaves inside the coffins. Once a coffin was shot with the white light, strange sounds started coming from inside. Soon, many corpse slaves jumped out of the coffins. Some of them were stiff, while others had more fluid movements, but they all came towards Shi Yang. The 7 corpse slaves that were awakened first were now already standing in front of Shi Yang. Shi Yang's eyes were cold and grim. His whole body was filled with the negative energies of violence, fear, madness, and slaughter. White mist wreathed his entire body, giving off a very evil feeling. The corpse slaves came forward and surrounded Shi Yang, but 3 of them were being cautious. Those 3 corpse slaves were probably only refined recently, and were probably only in the human realm before they died. When they moved, their joints made creaking and cracking sounds, as if the bones were still not completely refined. They should not have reached 100 years of age yet. The other 4 corpse slaves also seemed to be scared of the aura of negative energies around Shi Yang's body, but they still slowly moved forward. These 4 corpse slaves have a stronger corpse chi on them. When they moved, there were no noises from their joints, and their speed was a whole lot faster. With a cold expression, Shi Yang determined that these 4 corpse slaves should be earth corpses that were refined for over 100 years. Their limbs were no longer stiff, and they knew how to use some of their martial skills from when they were alive. Poochie. Behind him, the sound of a sharp weapon piercing into flesh suddenly resounded. Shi Yang turned around and saw that Xia Xinyan's little dagger had already pierced through the throat of a corpse sect disciple. That person's eyes were filled with unwillingness as he fell down on his back. After that person died, all the profound chi in his body scattered and flowed into Shi Yang's body. Including this guy, by this moment Shi Yang had already absorbed the profound chi of 3 disaster realm warriors. Those negative powers, mixed with hate and unwillingness, all went into Shi Yang's meridians. Right at this moment, 3 corpse sect disciples became blood red because of the grinding power of the gravitational field. They were slowly dying. The 2 Earth Realm warriors from Yin Yang Wonderland were also separately constrained by gravitational fields. The red and white lights on their bodies swirled around, defending against the grinding power in the field. Although they were constrained, they were still not hurt as they kept using the red and white light to fight against the grinding power in the field. After merging yin power, profound chi, and negative energies, the power of the gravitational fields had become astonishing. The 2 Earth Realm warriors were completely restrained. They would never be able to break through the constraints of the gravitational fields. The 7 corpse slaves that first came up did not immediately attack. They only surrounded Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan. Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan stood shoulder to shoulder, their expressions were serious. As they watched more and more corpse slave walk out of the stone chambers, their hearts slowly sank. This underground tomb went a couple dozens of meters deep into the earth, and the tomb was covered with corpse chi. Corpse chi was an extremely evil power, and it could even cut off the divine consciousness. Because of this barrier of corpse chi, all the fluctuations of profound chi in here were very well concealed. Thus, Li Zhuang, Ju Yueru, and other corpse sect people above the ground hadn't sensed the abnormality here. They still kept discussing important matters. We're in danger this time. Xia Xinyan's voice was cold. 1 sky corpse is already enough to kill us, not to mention that there are so many corpse slaves present too. All the corpse slaves slowly came up, one by one. In a short moment, there were already almost 100 corpse slaves surrounding Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan. The 3 corpse sect disciples under the grinding power of gravitational field were finally dead, with their eyes rolling back into their heads. Afterward, their profound chi quickly entered into Shi Yang's body, and all the meridians in Shi Yang's body started to tingle. Hang on. If we can hold up for half a day, I'll be able to recover your martial spirit. Shi Yang roared. What? Xia Xinyan was shocked. Do you have some sort of medicine? No. Shi Yang shook his head. Believe me, as long as we can hold for half a day, I really have a way to recover your martial spirit. In the dark forest, he already verified the abilities of the exotic powers in his body on Di Yalan and Mu Yudi. The exotic powers could not only enhance his martial spirit and profound qi, it could also help others awaken and recover their martial spirits. When Mu Yudi's music martial spirit was heavily injured and all the meridians in her body were shattered. But with the help of that exotic power, she quickly recovered. If that exotic power could recover music martial spirit, then, naturally, it could also recover Xia Xinyan's reincarnation martial spirit. As long as the meridians in his body could transform the profound qi and let it flow back into his body, then he could use that exotic power and help Xia Xinyan recover her original strength. Time. He only needed time. Xia Xinyan was surprised inside. She didn't know what methods Shi Yang had, but she chose to believe in him. She said, "All right, I'll try my best." Then the green ring on her finger suddenly threw out a ripple of glowing green light. Fist-sized silver balls quickly appeared, glistening in her palm. Once the silver balls appeared, Xia Xinyan immediately thrust her arm out and threw them at the surrounding corpse slaves. Boom, 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 boom. In the underground tomb, several explosions occurred. All of those silver balls were glistening with a silver light, and once they fell on the ground, they immediately burst open, blowing many corpse slaves into many pieces. Once, the explosion spread to the mortal slaves who were under 100 years in age, their bodies also split open. They couldn't defend against the power of the silver balls at all. The earth corpses, older than 100 years, had very firm bodies. Under the explosion of the silver balls, their entire bodies were charred, but they were not badly hurt. Those two sky corpses were still unmoved in those giant coffins, but they started to scream simultaneously. Dozens of mortal corpses and earth corpses, suddenly, turned crazy, under the screams of the sky corpses. Together, they all menacingly threw themselves towards Shi Yang. Shi Yang's expression was cold. The gravitational fields that killed the 3 corpse sect disciples suddenly moved and quickly appeared in front of him. 10 mortal and earth corpses sprinted forward and ran into the invisible field. They were constrained by the crushing power of the fields, which had a ferocious force inside. They couldn't get out of the field. Taking a deep breath, Shi Yang's body petrified, and his expression became fierce. He secretly performed his finger spear and headed into the group of corpse slaves. Boom, 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 bang, bang, bang. Shi Yang rampaged into the group of corpse slaves. Using the strength in his body after petrification, he crazily bombarded a lot of corpse slaves. His body was petrified, and he was also in the rampage state. At this moment Shi Yang's power was skyrocketing. The evil power in his body was like a wild whirlwind, such that his blows actually sent all those corpse slaves flying out. The mortal corpses were all blown into the air by Shi Yang's attacks. They couldn't defend against Shi Yang's fierce force. The 100-year-old earth corpses had bodies as hard as iron. Under Shi Yang's rampaging attacks, they were blown into the air, but then they would quickly stand back up, and, again, storm towards him in waves. The bodies of earth corpses were extremely hard. In the chest and stomach areas of some earth corpses even had naturally formed corpse armor. The corpse armor was made of corpse qi, and was extremely solid. Even Shi Yang's finger spear couldn't pierce through it. Most earth corpses were disaster realm warriors during their lifetimes, and they were already able to use 100% of the power from their lifetime. Under the raging attacks of Shi Yang, the earth corpses were completely fine. They would stand back up and fiercely storm towards Shi Yang again and again. 2 of the earth corpses were like spirit snakes. They appeared from the crowd of mortal corpses and, with creepy strange steps, they would suddenly appear and strike at Shi Yang from behind. In palms of the earth corpses, a sharp bone material knife suddenly appeared. That sharp knife rushed out of their palms, and forcefully stabbed into Shi Yang's back. Bang! Shi Yang's heart felt a stinging sensation. Against the sharp bone knife, Shi Yang's petrified body could still hold up, but it was still a bit too much for him to handle. One after another, More and more Earth corpses started using the martial skills from their lifetimes. They circulated corpse chi, as opposed to profound chi, and formed various pale grey light beams, shooting them at Shi Yang from all directions. Boom, boom. In the crowd of corpse slaves, it was finally too much for Shi Yang. Shaken, he started to back up under these attacks. Xia Xinyan wore a bright red set of armor. The armor glimmered with scorching firelight and had a very complex, yet rustic, pattern. In the pattern, there were traces of red light shining, like streaks of fire. Glimmering firelight rippled from the armor. Xia Xinyan stood there, unmoving, but the corpse slaves rarely attacked her, as if they were very afraid of the firelight on her armor. "Come to my side," Xia Xinyan exclaimed. Shi Yang's expression was ferocious. In the midst of corpse slaves, he suddenly clenched his teeth and performed the seal of life and death. Pieces of hand seals quickly appeared in his palms. One hand with life seals, and the other with death seals. The 14 seals didn't merge together, instead, they separated into 2 different directions and rushed out. Rumble. The 7 life seals shot out, and the corpse slaves, that were hit, exploded into pieces. They couldn't resist the attack of even a single life seal. The 7 death seals shot out, and fell on the corpse slaves. Those corpse slaves were fine, and continued to storm forward. Shi Yang was both delighted and surprised. The surprise was that the death seals had no effect on these dead beings. The delight was that the power of the life seals on the corpse slaves was ridiculously strong. They actually shattered the earth corpses in one blow. The life seals contained vigorous amounts of vitality. The strange vitality in the life seals seemed to be the nemesis of these dead beings. Once touched by the life seals, whether it be the mortal corpses or the earth corpses, their bodies would all immediately shatter. The life seals seemed to have stirred the devastating emotions in the bodies of the corpse slaves. The lifeless corpse slaves couldn't handle a single blow from the life seals. Boom, boom. Shi Yang looked inspired. He gave up on using the death seals, and continuously struck out with the life seals. All the mortal corpses and earth corpses were torn to pieces once they were touched by the life seals. At this moment, the 2 sky corpses flew out of their coffins. A feeling of excitement flashed across their pale grey eyes. Once they came over, they quickly pushed away the surrounding corpse slaves. Puffing their chests, they directly faced the 2 sets of life seals that Shi Yang sent out. Boom, boom, boom tilde tilde. The 14 life seals separately fell onto the 2 bodies. Unexpectedly, the 2 sky corpses did not burst apart from the inside. The 14 life seals sank into the bodies of the 2 sky corpses and glowed inside their bodies, slowly shifting into the minds of the 2 sky corpses. In the minds of the 2 sky corpses, there was suddenly a strange sound. Life projections. The life seals clearly appeared on the skulls of the 2 sky corpses. The brains of the sky corpses seemed to shift around in a peculiar trend. A gust of strange life force slowly grew inside the minds of the 2 sky corpses. These 2 sky corpses, which had been dead for thousands of years, seemed to have regained some of their life. This life was completely different from a human's. Shi Yang was stunned. He blankly watched the mutation occur in the 2 sky corpses, not knowing what had happened. Then, at this moment, the blood vein ring on his finger also suddenly put off a series of colorful lights. Chapter 131, Controlling the Corpses. Chapter 131, Controlling the Corpses. The blood vein ring had strange lights rippling from it, which looked like characters of some ancient language. A bright light came out from the blood vein ring, bathing the surrounding area in an evil and ancient aura. Numerous ancient characters swam around the blood vein ring, like fish. Suddenly the ancient characters in the front touched the sky corpses. A surprising thing happened. The ancient characters got attached on the sky corpses, gradually moving towards their heads, then burrowing inside. More and more ancient letters touched the 2 sky corpses. The ancient characters seemed to have come to life and were speedily penetrating into the sky corpses' heads. The 7 life seals merged into their heads and gave the sky corpses an almost lifelike appearance. Seals appeared in the 2 sky corpses' eyes. Those were the life seals from before. One after another, life seals floated across the sky corpses' eyes, as if giving them life. The two sky corpses stood still while emitting a bright light from the crowns of their heads. Human expressions showed up on the faces of the sky corpses. The two sky corpses appeared to be in a quiet confusion. Soon, the sky corpses' abnormality disappeared and the life seals dissipated from their eyes. Shi Yang had a serious look on his face as he gazed at two sky corpses in surprise. The light on the blood vein ring faded, but the ring had established some sort of connection with the two sky corpses. Shi Yang injected his spirit power in the blood vein ring, and, surprisingly, found that he could sense the presence of the two sky corpses and could feel their moods very clearly. The whole process of sky corpses regaining their consciousness was quite short. Shi Yang, what is it? Xia Xinyan, who was in her red armor, looked at the sky corpses, disbelief on her face. There seems to be life force coming from the two sky corpses. How could this be? Life force? What does that mean? Shi Yang frowned. Only a 10,000 years old corpse king can form a consciousness and acquire life force. Xia Xinyan kept shaking her head in confusion. These two sky corpses can't acquire consciousness in such a short amount of time. No way. Only a corpse king can form a consciousness and come to life. Shi Yang was shocked. Xia Xinyan nodded with certainty. We can't escape this time. We can't win against the sky corpses. Since they have regained life, they are more powerful. Shi Yang's expression changed as he became alert. The two sky corpses were standing in confusion. After a long while, they looked at Shi Yang, their eyes shining with the life seals. Shi Yang was astonished. As the two sky corpses looked at him, his blood vein ring started resonating with two streams of odd waves, which came from the two sky corp. The two streams of waves seemed friendly to Shi Yang, as if asking about something. The two sky corpses were asking him what to do. Gazing at the two sky corpses' eyes, and feeling the odd waves in the blood vein ring, Shi Yang realized the abnormality. Control the other corpse slaves. Shi Yang took a deep breath, and formed some spirit power into a wave in his mind and sent it to the blood vein ring. The life seals in the two sky corpses suddenly lit up. The two sky corpses screamed together. One after another, the mortal and earth corpses left Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan and gathered around the sky corpses. With the screams of the sky corpses, a wave of strange energy spread throughout the grave, making all the mortal corpses and earth corpses obedient. In the underground grave, dozens of coffins were opened by the corpse slaves lying in them. All the corpse slaves came out and gathered around the two sky corpses. Xia Xinyan looked pale and sighed, "We will die this time." "Xinyan, do you think it's dishonorable to die with me?" Shi Yang turned back and smiled brightly. Xia Xinyan was surprised. "You truly care about such a thing at this crucial moment? Tell me, do you think I'm unworthy?" Shi Yang was insistent. "No, you are naughty, but you are interesting as well." In the grave, which was covered with corpse slaves, Xia Xinyan paused and said, "I don't think much, but I will certainly regret it a bit." "Regret?" Shi Yang smiled, "It's okay. Live on and you can always make up for the regret." He only needed to kill several thousand people, and that would be equivalent to decades of heavy cultivation of an ordinary person. With this special feature of the mysterious martial spirit, one day, he would be able to talk face to face with the demon king Bo-Zun. Of course, he would never tell anyone else about this. The next 2 days, Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan both stayed on the deserted island. They survived by eating fish meat and drinking fish blood. The sea was endless, there were no flying demon beasts, nor were there any giant ships. It might as well have been wiser to stay on the island than to blindly leave. Xia Xinyan also approved of this. These past 2 days, other than eating together, they both cultivated on their own and did not disturb each other. Another day passed. Sitting on the sand, Shi Yang extended his mind's power, and he suddenly sensed an object in the distance. Instantly his expression bloomed, as he quickly stood up and shouted to Xia Xinyan, "There's a ship." Xia Xinyan came over from the other side of the island and followed Shi Yang to gaze, looking out to the east. In 15 minutes, an enormous iron ship slowly appeared. The iron ship's flag flew in the ocean wind, looking majestic. "Ah! Aarth!" Shi Yang screamed loudly. His shriek pierced through the sky, like the howls of wolves. Xia Xinyan frowned and covered her ears, cursing him in her mind. She glared at him bitterly. That enormous iron ship seemed to have heard the calls, and slowly started sailing towards them. Shi Yang waved his arms and continued screaming. "Hey!" he suddenly exclaimed. There was a shady look on his face as he chuckled. "Xinyan, that ship seems quite interesting." On that giant steel ship hung many flags. Lifelike erotic images were embroidered on each of the flags. There was a couple in the wheelbarrow position, a couple in the lotus position, a couple in the flower on the back position, and many more like this. Under the blowing of ocean wind, those erotic images flew wildly. The lifelike men and women on those erotic images looked as if they were coming to life and showing great vigor. Xia Xinyan flushed, and she suddenly thought of something, exclaiming, "The ship is from the yin-yang wonderland." Then, Xia Xinyan quickly touched the green jade ring on her finger and took out a pack of powdered medicine, which she quickly smeared on her face. A few minutes later, Xia Xinyan looked like a different person. Her breathtaking appearance was completely gone. Instead, her face was yellow and dark and filled with pimples, making her a slightly ugly young girl. "What the hell are you doing?" Shi Yang was dumbfounded. People from the yin-yang wonderland tend to heavily indulge in their lust. They're one of the most unique forces in the endless sea. The disciples of the yin-yang wonderland cultivate through sexual intercourse, so outstanding-looking men and women become targets for disciples of the yin-yang wonderland. At the moment, my power has not recovered, so if I were to reveal my true face, I'm afraid I'd be doomed. After finishing up her disguise, Xia Xinyan finally relaxed a bit and spoke indifferently. "Ah," Shi Yang exclaimed, and then frowned and said, "Then wouldn't a uniquely tempered and extraordinarily handsome man like me be doomed to suffer?" Some male disciples of the yin-yang wonderland are also gay. Xia Xinyan said indifferently, secretly feeling delightful. "Gay?" Shi Yang's face quickly changed. Edited by Jimmy, Eli, and Vic. Chapter 132, The Slaughter of the Island. Chapter 132, The Slaughter of the Island. Corpse slaves walked out from the 3 caves of the underground grave and stood in front of the stone towers. In the cool moonlight, the corpse slaves slowly moved out and encircled the entrance of a cave. A male sky corpse and a female sky corpse walked out from the cave. In their grey eyes, 7 small life seals can be seen, looking like 7 stars. The 2 sky corpses came out from the underground grave and roared. In the number 93 burial site. The coffins opened, one by one, and corpse slaves walked out, heading towards the center of the island. From the burial site, suddenly came horrified screams of the yin-yang wonderland disciples, combined with those of the corpse sect disciples. To control so many corpse slaves, only presbyters of the corpse sect who were at Sky Realm had the ability. Seeing so many corpse slaves pop up, the disciples of the corpse sect were astonished, as they assumed that the master of the 2 sky corpses, Presbyter Yin Hai, had come. From the roars produced by the 2 sky corpses, the corpse slaves in the burial site woke up and moved in their direction. Guo Qi was scared and screamed, "How could this happen? No one else but Yin Hai could move the 2 sky corpses, because every sky corpse had a corpse spirit seal engraved in them by their master. They could only move at their master's call." The 2 free sky corpses frightened Guo Qi. Yin Hai was not there, but the sky corpses walked out of their own will, which baffled this core disciple of the corpse sect. Li Zhuang and Zhu Yu'er, the 2 priests of the yin-yang wonderland, knew a lot about the sky corpses of the corpse sect. They were totally shocked that the sky corpse walked out by themselves. Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan were the last to walk out of the underground grave. Xia Xinyan was confused too, as she couldn't understand how Shi Yang was controlling the 2 sky corpses. "Bastard!" Guo Qi screamed, with a look of extreme anger on his face. "What did you do in the grave?" Shi Yang was standing in the middle of wafts of white smoke, floating around the entrance of the cave. Without taking a look at Guo Qi, he looked to Li Zhuang and Zhu Yu'er and spoke indifferently, saying, "What a good scheme. You wanted to sell me to the corpse sect as a live corpse. I worked so hard for you on the ship, for only some water and fish, and you treat me like this." Li Zhuang and Zhu Yu'er looked gloomy, without a word. Especially you. Shi Yang cast his cold eyes on Ju Yu. I just refused to sleep with your dirty body, and you want me to be a live corpse. Evil female. Kid, you are seeking death. Ju Yu frowned and spoke coldly. I don't know why you are still alive, but you won't live to see tomorrow. Oh really? Shi Yang sneered and pointed at Ju Yu, shouting, kill her. The female sky corpse quickly dashed out. The odd energies in the gullies she passed injected into her body, and a grey corpse armor appeared on her body. The female sky corpse had sharp shiny fingers, which quickly thrust towards Ju Yu. Ju Yu's seductive face finally showed fear, and she screamed, no way. Li Zhuang and Guiqi were shocked too. They couldn't figure out how Shi Yang was controlling the sky corpses. Let's go. Shi Yang grinned and walked towards the iron ship. That male sky corpse stood beside him and roared while other corpse slaves gathered and made a path for the male sky corpse. Kill. Kill them all. Shi Yang yelled out, an uncaring expression on his face. Hundreds of corpse slaves suddenly went crazy and dashed toward the corpse sect and the Yin-Yang Wonderland disciples. The disciples of the corpse sect got so frightened that they kept blowing their whistles. Some of the corpse slaves stopped, while others kept dashing forward, regardless of the bells. The corpse sect disciples' expressions changed, and they began to frantically ring the bells to control those corpses. However, not all corpse slaves in the number 93 burial site belonged to those disciples. Many earth corpses in this burial site were corpse slaves of the core disciples and priests of the corpse sect. These corpse slaves had their master's corpse spirit seals and could not be controlled by the disciples here. Their corpse slaves were at high realms. Therefore, since the corpse slaves took the two sky corpses' order to kill the disciples of the corpse sect and the Yin-Yang Wonderland, miserable screams echoed the number 93 burial site. The corpse sect disciples shouted and ran away, while disciples of the Yin-Yang Wonderland trembled and ran around like headless chickens. Especially those female disciples, who were even not able to use half of their power to protect themselves. The number 93 burial site was quickly wrapped in miserable screams. Soon, Ju Yu was beaten by the female sky corpse. The female sky corpse was at the second sky of Nirvana realm before she died, and after 1,000 years of training, she was capable of more than what she was when she was alive. Once in a battle, they could still use the martial skills they knew before they died. Warriors of the Yin-Yang Wonderland developed fast by double training. However, their profound qi was not as pure as other warriors at the same realm, for they were generally weaker than other warriors at the same stages. Ju Yu was not an exception. Though she was at the second sky of Nirvana realm, her power was the same as a general warrior of the first sky of the Nirvana realm. In front of that sky corpse, she could barely defend herself. Li Zhuang had to take action to defend Ju Yu from that female sky corpse. The male sky corpse was within 10 steps from Shi Yang, and he kept screaming and controlling the corpse slaves at the burial site, making a road for Shi Yang to head towards that ship. Shi Yang had an indifferent look as he walked to the iron ship, shoulder to shoulder with Xia Xinyan. Nearby, wisps of negative energy, coming from the disciples of the corpse sect and the Yin-Yang Wonderland, surged into Shi Yang's meridians. Shi Yang's meridians began to hurt, and he had to concentrate a lot. He kept triggering his spirit power, pouring it into the blood vein ring, and sending messages to the two sky corpses. The spirit feedback from the sky corpses became weaker, as the sky corpses seemed to go against Shi Yang's control. Shi Yang had to keep triggering his spirit power, and conveying friendly intentions in his spirit power to comfort the two sky corpses. He was not as relaxed as he looked. Let's leave soon. Shi Yang suddenly grasped Xia Xinyan's hand, and sped up, his face pale. Since he consumed too much spirit power, Shi Yang felt a little dizzy, and it was becoming harder and harder to control the two sky corpses. Xia Xinyan noticed Shi Yang's abnormality, but she kept silent and let Shi Yang drag her toward the iron ship. Li Zhuang and Ju Yu were entangled by the female sky corpse, so they could only watch Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan leave. That male sky corpse was standing beside Shi Yang, so Guiqi didn't dare move. He, instead, secretly sent messages to the headquarters of the corpse sect with an instrument in his hand. Many disciples of the Yin-Yang Wonderland and the corpse sect were killed by the corpse slaves. On the road, Shi Yang absorbed profound qi from at least 20 low-level warriors, who were at nascent and human realms. Soon, Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan arrived at the iron ship. "Can you sail a ship?" Shi Yang suddenly asked. "If you can't, I have to catch someone who can sail." "Don't bother. I know how to sail a ship." Xia Xinyan was confident, and she dragged Shi Yang to the iron ship. "These ships are controlled through the power of a demon crystal. We don't need to really sail it, but, instead, give it a direction. It will move automatically, as long as the power of demon crystal doesn't run up. We, of the Xia family, have this sort of ships too." Shi Yang felt relieved. Bang! Boarding on the iron ship, Shi Yang sat down straightly and said with a pale face, "Control the ship, and I will give the sky corpses the last order." The 2 sky corpses didn't board the ship. Shi Yang closed his eyes, triggered the rest of his spirit power, and injected it to the blood vein ring. That male sky corpse suddenly hollowed and dashed toward Zhu Yu and Li Zhuang. "Go!" Shi Yang yelled. Bang, bang, bang. A great thundering sound came from the iron ship. The huge iron ship of the Yin-Yang Wonderland sailed out from the burial site. Inside the burial site, the disciples of the Yin-Yang Wonderland screamed. Li Zhuang and Zhu Yu couldn't even save themselves, so they had to watch the ship leave. Shi Yang got dizzy as his spirit power ran up. He laid back on the deck, spreading his arms and legs. Chapter 133, The Countercharge. Chapter 133, The Countercharge. Sponsored by Richard O'Brien. Inside the corpse palace. Many presbyters of the corpse sect were sitting on coffins, training. They were absorbing the odd energy gushing out from the coffins. Yin Hai was anxious, and his wrinkled face was covered with a nervous expression. "Yin Hai, go to the number 93 burial site at once. Your 2 sky corpses are slaughtering my disciples without anyone's order." The palace lord's hoarse voice came from the bottom of the corpse palace. All the presbyters present in the large corpse palace woke up and looked at Yin Hai in confusion. Yin Hai looked serious as he kneeled on the coffin. "Yes, I will go right now. Jing Song, you go with Yin Hai and find out what happened." The palace lord ordered again. The presbyter on the coffin near Yin Hai also kneeled down. "Yes, my lord. Go and find out why the 2 sky corpses are behaving unusually. Let me know as soon as possible." "Yes, my lord." On the iron ship, Shi Yang was sprawled out on the deck. He was completely exhausted. As he overused his spirit power and was also suffering a backlash from using rampage, his body and spirit were both exhausted. However, his meridians were still being purified by his profound qi. The iron ship had left the burial site. Yet, Shi Yang could still hear the screams coming from the burial site, which was now miles away. Under the moonlight, the burial site was still filled with fear. After boarding the ship, Shi Yang injected spirit power into the blood vein ring and ordered the 2 corpses to slaughter everyone on the island. Shi Yang didn't know how long the 2 heaven corpses would follow his orders, so he was simply satisfied with safely leaving the island. Xia Xinyan disappeared as soon as she boarded the ship. She went to sail the ship. Spreading his limbs, Shi Yang gazed at the stars, which gave out wisps of power, which concentrated at his heart. What a pity that he couldn't use his star martial spirit. Shi Yang could only sigh in resignation. In recent days, the star martial spirit kept absorbing power from the stars. He could feel the unusual energy gathering in his heart. However, he couldn't figure out how to use the star martial spirit. "Are you okay?" Xia Xinyan suddenly popped up and asked, her voice filled with concern. "I'm okay right now." Shi Yang smiled bitterly. "Find some chains on this ship and strap me tightly to the ship." "What?" Xia Xinyan yelled in astonishment. "What are you going to do?" "The martial skill I operated is strange. After using, it will create a backlash in my body. It can take away my reasoning and make me go crazy. Strap me in, or I'm afraid I will do something terrible to you." Shi Yang gazed at her seriously. "What will you do?" Xia Xinyan's expression changed. "Do you still remember when we met?" Shi Yang took a breath. I was driven crazy by my martial skill and had to go to the Misty Pavilion to release the pressure on those girls. I will chain you up. Xia Xinyan was decisive, and she quickly left to get those shackles. A few minutes later, Shi Yang was completely tied up by the shackles, which were as thick as a man's arm. The shackles were dark, and there was cold air gushing out from them. These shackles are made of an unusual metal. Even warriors of the Nirvana realm couldn't break through it. Xia Xinyan wiped the sweat off her forehead. Feeling weak, she sat down, cross-legged, 5 meters away from Shi Yang, and focused her crystal-like eyes on Shi Yang. All the meridians in Shi Yang's body were producing negative energy, which was quickly corroding away his reasoning. With a hideous face, tortured by the murderous bloodthirst, Shi Yang was breathing heavily. That's great. The last time in the Misty Pavilion, you slept with the girls because of this backlash? And the time in the Ling family too? Xia Xinyan asked with a complex expression. So all this time I was misunderstanding you? More or less. Shi Yang grinned. The power of the backlash does ruin my reasoning and expand the negative will. However, that negative will is still my true intentions. In general, I'm a bad guy. Xia Xinyan was shocked. When my reasoning becomes clear, then immediately come to my side. Shi Yang yelled, and then his body began to tremble. The profound qi, which was purifying in his meridians, grew faster and faster as negative emotions penetrated his mind and heart. He couldn't control himself. Why? Let me help you recover your martial spirit. Huh? How? Remember what I said? Shi Yang shouted, and stood up like a monster, the shackles ringing loudly. At that moment, Shi Yang's eyes showed not the slightest bit of human emotions. He was like a bloodthirsty monster from hell. His body emitted an endless murderous aura, which seemed to want to terminate the world. Xia Xinyan's expression shifted, and she took a few steps back and stayed at a distance from Shi Yang. In such short time, Shi Yang turned from a lucid man to a monster, which shocked Xia Xinyan. She finally realized that Shi Yang was not joking. As he said, this backlash could eat up his reasoning and bring out his darker intentions. On the deck, strapped by the shackles, Shi Yang was struggling and howling, using all of his strength to try and get rid of the shackles. His howls echoed over the silent sea. Xia Xinyan's eyes sparkled as she stared at Shi Yang. After a long time, Shi Yang's howls lost their energy and he laid on the deck quivering. The bloodthirsty and murderous aura was damaging his body, and so he was covered with blood. After operating Rampage, his body was already weak, but due to the backlash, Shi Yang was now hurt again. Even his veins and bones were severely damaged. Covered with blood, Shi Yang's eyes were unclear. Xia Xinyan was astonished. Shi Yang was too strong. After that round of crazy howl, his murderous will was still present. What kind of terrifying martial skill was this? Xia Xinyan was astonished. Shi Yang was like a mysterious, deep pond, full of secrets. Shi Yang's howls got weaker and weaker. Gradually, he quieted down, and his dull eyes came clear. Come here. Shi Yang opened his mouth wide, and, with an extremely weak and quiet voice, beckoned Xia Xinyan. Showered in blood, Shi Yang looked to be in a tremendous amount of pain, but he was still concerned with helping Xia Xinyan recover. Xia Xinyan was moved as she slowly walked to Shi Yang, softly saying, "Have a good rest. I'm not in a hurry. I will protect you from now on. Now take care of yourself." Xia Xinyan couldn't be softer. "I can't help later if I don't help you now." Shi Yang struggled to reach out one of his hands. "Grab my hand. Quick." Xia Xinyan was stunned and touched that bloody hand. Wisps of odd energy flew out from Shi Yang's palm. It went into Xia Xinyan's arm and flew to her chest, concentrating at the center of her incarnation martial spirit and nourishing it. Xia Xinyan's body quivered, and her eyes sparkled. She could clearly feel that, under the nourishment, her wounded reincarnation martial spirit was quickly recovering. That odd energy was even more effective than pills. Drenched in blood, Shi Yang showed an ugly smile. "See? I didn't lie." "No, you didn't." Xia Xinyan's voice was soft and sweet, as she quietly stared at Shi Yang. "It's okay now. Have a rest, you will recover before dawn." Shi Yang withdrew his hand and smiled. Now I can count on you. I won't let anyone harm you as long as I'm alive. Xia Xinyan nodded and said softly, "Have a good rest." Shi Yang slowly closed his eyes and laid back on the deck. Inside his bleeding body, the immortal martial spirit was operating, quietly recovering his body. Soon, the bleeding stopped, and the wounds on his skin started rapidly recovering. Xia Xinyan didn't immediately rest but gazed at Shi Yang attentively. 10 minutes later, when she found that Shi Yang's body had recovered, Xia Xinyan settled down and sat beside Shi Yang, beginning to train and recovering her strength. Chapter 134, The Hengluo Sea. Chapter 134, The Hengluo Sea. Sponsored by Richard O'Brien. It was noon and the sun was high in the sky. An iron ship was moving, quickly passing through the sea. It was sailing directly towards the Hengluo Sea. The Hengluo Sea was in between them and the Kiara Sea. To get to the Kiara Sea, one must go through the Hengluo Sea. The Hengluo Sea had countless islands. It was under the influence of the forces of the Three Gods sect, the Dongfang family, and the Jiyu family. These three forces controlled nearly half the islands in the Hengluo Sea. The iron ship sailed quickly under the blazing sun. On the deck, Shi Yang's face was calm. He gazed into the distance, basking in the fluttering ocean breeze. With a green dress on, Xia Xinyan's hair flew in the wind. Her face was back to normal, gorgeous as ever, as she stood shoulder to shoulder with him. It had been 3 months. Not only did Xia Xinyan's martial spirit recover back to its original state, but, through the many challenges, she finally made further progress and stepped into the Earth Realm. Xia Xinyan in the Earth Realm had the grace of a fairy. Her temperament was elegant and graceful. In her gestures, there was a stern and inviolable grandeur. "Xinyan, in these past 3 months, you've improved quite a lot. It seems that, in order to catch up with you, I have a lot of work to do." Shi Yang casually smiled, and turned around to look at the beautiful woman next to him. "You've once said that one day, if I can defeat you, you will." Xia Xinyan smiled enchantingly, like a blooming green lotus, indescribably elegant and beautiful. "Oh why are you always obsessed about this sort of things?" In these 3 months, the two were together from morning till evening. They talked about anything and everything, and had been getting along well. As always, Shi Yang was outspoken, and he often teased her about sexual things. However, ever since they went through the hardships at the burial site, Xia Xinyan cut him a lot of slack. She didn't mind his cocky words, and it was only when Shi Yang attempted a deviant act that she would actually quietly show her Earth Realm capabilities, letting Shi Yang know to restrain himself. "Do you want to deny it?" Shi Yang looked indignant. He pretended to be angry and said, "You're the reason for my motivation and hard work. Without you, my cultivation would become dull and tedious." Xia Xinyan's beautiful eyes glimmered. She casually smiled. "People like you don't need a woman to urge you. Even without me, you'd still crazily torture yourself. Like you said, you are a masochist." "Ha, masochist, I like that nickname." In these past 3 months, Shi Yang had endlessly cultivated the second sky of rampage, trying to merge the negative energies into his blood. These past 3 months were, for Shi Yang's, a torturous 3-month. Merging the negative energies into his blood was already extremely cruel on its own. Before he could get the hang it, Shi Yang's cultivation was accompanied by piercing screams every time. Each time he cultivated, it was as painful as hell. Whether it be day or night, Xia Xinyan was often woken by his screams. In these 3 months, Xia Xinyan finally truly learned what methods Shi Yang had used in order to obtain the vigorous profound qi and the tough state of mind he had. By insanely torturing himself. Unbelievably, Shi Yang was also bizarrely ruthless when treating himself. Every time he cultivated was like a journey into the depths of hell. Shi Yang's heavy cultivation thoroughly shocked her. It made Xia Xinyan realize that the accomplishments Shi Yang had obtained to this day were not for no reason. The hard work he did was unimaginable to anyone. Only those who could be cruel to themselves would be able to do what he did and obtain massive powers in a short time. "Believe it or not, I'll screw you." Shi Yang grinned. He chuckled grimly. The corners of Xia Xinyan's lips curled into a mysterious smile. her long and slim swan-like neck twisted around, and her beautiful eyes, that were as clear as lake water, fell upon Shi Yang. You really are a masochist. In these past few days I've beat you up so many times, yet you still won't change your perverted heart. I'm coming. Shi Yang lightly shouted. His body was like a sharp sword, and a magnificent strength suddenly burst out as he rapidly lunged towards Xia Xinyan. In the middle of his charge, Shi Yang's body suddenly shriveled up. Wisps of negative powers covered his entire body with a high momentum, like a dragon coming out of the abyss. You're asking to be beaten up? Xia Xinyan chuckled as her delicate body lightly swung around and floated like a phantom. Like a leaf, Xia Xinyan moved with the wind and her beautiful hair waved as her delicate hands formed a millstone-size green lotus. The green lotus was chilling to the bone. The pieces of sharp blade-like petals in the middle of the lotus shone with a frightening cold light. Once the green lotus appeared, it immediately shot towards the oncoming Shi Yang. Boom! Shi Yang crashed straight into the green lotus. The sharp blade-like petals in the middle of the green lotus suddenly contracted, and fiercely bound Shi Yang's body. Ka. Struggling sounds came from inside the green lotus. Shi Yang's body was tightly wrapped up by the green lotus, and he couldn't move at all. A smile lingered on Xia Xinyan's lips. Her delicate hands slowly formed a seal, and a bright green light fell into the green lotus. The green lotus slowly contracted, its strength like a mountain, growing bigger and bigger and completely confining Shi Yang. A chilling icy energy spread from inside the green lotus, freezing cold light appeared in the air, and the cold energy seeped through Shi Yang's entire body. First sky of rampage. All the negative powers in Shi Yang's body gathered in his arms. The negative power in the thick white mist was like a tide, rushing towards the center of the green lotus. The green lotus shone with a mysterious light. Beams of green light, as thick as a man's arm, kept stimulating. They tightly gripped Shi Yang like chains, and their binding force increased by 30%. The icy energy seeped through his whole body. All of Shi Yang's profound qi started decreasing in circulation speed, but he still clenched his teeth and kept struggling. All right, stop being cocky, Xia Xinyan said reproachfully. She swung her delicate hand in mid-air and motioned towards the green lotus. The green lotus suddenly cracked open. Pieces of petals flew out and gathered into Xia Xinyan's hand. Sigh. Shi Yang smiled wryly. He breathed out, and shook his head. Back when I was in the third sky of the human realm, I could kill disaster realm warriors by using these negative powers. But now that I'm in the disaster realm, why can't I shake you? Other than the difference in the vigorousness of profound qi, disaster realm warriors focus more on their state of mind. Xia Xinyan chuckled. The profound qi inside you is more vigorous and pure than ordinary warriors of the first sky of the disaster realm. Your martial skills are also mysterious and unpredictable. Using negative powers, you can kill warriors in the second sky of the disaster realm, and you could go face to face with warriors in the third sky of the disaster realm. However, it would be difficult for you to win against Earth realm warriors. I just recently stepped into this realm, and I can already suppress you. If it were anyone else, you would lose even more miserably. Shi Yang frowned and stayed silent. I know you haven't used all your powers yet. Xia Xinyan smiled again and continued, but even if you really use all your power, you could still only fight with a warrior at the third sky of the disaster realm. Whether you will win or not is hard to say. In your area, the resources for warriors were limited, martial skills were poor in quality, and there wasn't much knowledge about martial spirits. But the Endless Sea is different. In the 15 forces, any central warrior at the third sky of disaster realm is perfect in cultivating all sorts of secret skills. They also have a very thorough understanding of martial spirits, and, most of all, they don't lack in battle experience. Do you understand? Yes. Shi Yang slowly nodded. Oh, you. Xia Xinyan shook her head. A first sky of the disaster realm warrior being able to oppose a third sky of the disaster realm warrior is already unbelievable. What else do you want? Could you possibly be thinking of straight up killing Earth and Nirvana realm people? Hehe, I do have that thought. Xia Xinyan was exasperated. She glared at him and shouted, remember, don't act rashly. Don't really think that you can fight it out with an Earth realm warrior. Starting from the disaster realm, fighting is no longer limited to the amount of profound chi, but also one's level of insight, the level of one's martial skills, and one's proficiency in said skills. You're still so young. Do you really think you can win against a warrior that has decades of experience? Shi Yang became silent again. All right, I'll give you some encouragement. Xia Xinyan's beautiful eyes rolled around, her fair-skinned neck showed some redness. If you can really defeat me one day, then, when I want to marry, you'll be the first choice. Really? Shi Yang's expression shook, his eyes glimmered. Xia Xinyan was a little too embarrassed to look at him. She turned her head away and put her back against him. She said lightly, "Yes, really." Shi Yang grinned and laughed foolishly. Half a month later. Finally, this iron ship officially had entered into the Hengluo Sea. The Hengluo Sea had countless islands. Once you entered into this sea, you would go past many different kinds of islands. On the iron ship, the yin-yang wonderland flags, with the erotic images, were taken down long ago. Now this iron ship had no more traces of the yin-yang wonderland. A giant harbor appeared in front of the iron ship. There were dozens of ships parked in the harbor. Some ships were a lot bigger than the one Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan were on. Many warriors of different capabilities stood on those iron ships. Many shirtless warriors were carrying the cargo on the ship and transporting them to the harbor. Outside the harbor, there was a ring-shaped square. There were many different kinds of carriages parked on the square, and men and women, dressed in colorful warriors' clothing, were shouting in the ring-shaped square. There were also people fighting in the square, battling with their lives at stake. This Menluo Island doesn't belong to the Three Gods sect, the Dongfang family, or the Jiyu family. It is the possession of the few collaborating forces on the island. We should go get some food on the island, and inquire about the current situation in the Endless Sea. We don't need to stay long. Xia Xinyan had a veil over her face. She stood on the iron ship while looking into the distance, and quietly explained. Shi Yang nodded. This Menluo Island is not small. It's probably half the size of Qianyun City. In the Hengluo Sea, the Menluo Island already counts as a small island. It's also very remote, being without any rich mines or other naturally valuable resources. If it had these resources, the Three Gods sect, the Dongfang family, and the Jiyu family wouldn't have left it alone. Xia Xinyan smiled casually. In the Endless Sea, bigger islands are a few times the size of the whole merchant union. They call them islands, but, in reality, they're like a continent. Don't fuss about it too much. Are you mocking me? Ha, I guess so. Xia Xinyan smiled and nodded. Hey. Suddenly, Xia Xinyan exclaimed. Her expression was strange. She murmured under her breath, "Why would the magical Wonderland's ship be here? Ah, and the Saintess from the Heaven Lake Divine Land. The Dongfang family's ship, the Cloud Breaker. What? What is going on?" Rumble. Their iron ship shook as it was forcefully hit. Shi Yang stumbled and suddenly leaned on Xia Xinyan. Shi Yang grabbed Xia Xinyan in his arms and frowned. "Who hit us?" "First, let go of me." Xia Xinyan snorted and glared at him menacingly. "You, whenever you get a chance, you start getting presumptuous and full of yourself again. Now let go of me." When the beauty fell into his arms, Shi Yang's heart shook. He carefully admired her splendid body first, and then finally let go. The Jiyu family's ship, the Dark Dawn. Xia Xinyan's brows furrowed, and she spoke coldly. "It's Jiyu Jiang's ship. It seems that some changes happened on Menluo Island, or else there wouldn't be so many forces gathering here." "Jiyu Jianga, who's that?" Shi Yang asked with a scowl. "The Jiyu family's swordmaster genius. When he was just born, the dragon-slaying sword, which had been stuck in the Jiyu family's sword mountain for centuries, flew out on its own. It kept floating 30 feet above his head and claimed its master voluntarily. Jiyu Jianga has the sword spirit, martial spirit. It is also known that he can communicate with magic swords. A monster. He's not even that monstrous. His little sister, Jiyu Linglong, is more of a monster. When she was just born, the 10,000 swords in the Jiyu family's sword mountain rang in harmony, and 7 magic swords flew out together and voluntarily merged into her body. This monstrous girl has the heart of the magic sword martial spirit. She has the ability to control spirited magic swords by nature. When her mind wills it, the sword moves, up to a 10,000 li distance. For her, beheading someone is as easy as taking something out of her pocket. Chapter 135, Tip of the Iceberg. Chapter 135, Tip of the Iceberg. Sponsored by Richard O'Brien. The ship called Dark Dawn was long and sharp. Like a sharp weapon, it stabbed into the iron ship that Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan were on. The Dark Dawn was made of some mysterious metal, it was completely black and emanated a mysterious strength. The bow of the ship was as sharp as the tip of a sword. It forcefully stabbed into the interior of the ship that Shi Yang was on, almost splitting it in half. The Dark Dawn wasn't large, it was only 30 to 40 meters long. There were 5 people were standing on the deck of the ship. The young man in the lead was wearing a long silver robe. His brows were like sharp swords, and he was extremely handsome. He stood there like a cold unsheathed sword, with his own oppressing atmosphere. At the moment, the young man seemed to be slightly embarrassed. He gave a hollow laugh and put his fists together in greetings. He spoke from afar, "Sorry, I was steering the ship in a hurry, so I was going a bit too fast. When I realized we were going to crash, it was already too late. Sorry. I'm willing to compensate you for your damages." Behind him, there was a line of 4 Nirvana realm warriors. The 4 elders were in all different shapes, but they were all breathing calmly. The light in their eyes glimmered, and their level of cultivation was very high. "If I were to crash into your ship, then say I'm sorry and that I would compensate you for your losses, would you be easy to talk to?" Xia Xinyan spoke coldly, with an indifferent expression on her face. Her eyes, under the veil, were filled with anger. The young man was dazed at first, then he lightly laughed. "I'm the easy person to talk to. If I was really crashed in to buy you, I wouldn't ask for compensation at all. When treating a beautiful lady, I would never haggle over such things." The young man put his fists together again. His attitude was very friendly, as if he didn't want to have any conflicts with Xia Xinyan. The young man was in the second sky of Disaster Realm. His figure was thin and tall and his skin was as smooth as jade. No matter what, he was an outstandingly handsome man. Xia Xinyan was indifferent. "If you tell me what is happening on Menluo Island, I'll forget this matter ever happened." Shi Yang was shocked. This young man was obviously the Jiyu family's Jiyu Jiang'er. He possessed the sword spirit martial spirit and had a spirit-level weapon, the dragon-slaying sword. He was an outstanding young talent in the Jiyu family. Such a figure, if he were to be in the Merchant Union, would have been arrogant, no matter what. But this guy was gentle and polite, and his temperament was mild. This was very special. God knows how the Jiyu family taught him to be like that. This made Shi Yang a little curious. Before Jiyu Jiang'er could even speak, a short fat warrior behind him quietly furrowed his brows and lightly said, "Miss, my young master is kind, and he is willing to compensate you for your losses. You can name any price." This guy was in the 3rd sky of the Nirvana realm. He stood there with the force of a mountain. His short fat body downplayed the mountainous forces he could probably unleash upon the world around him. "Losses?" Xia Xinyan sneered and said aggressively, "This little bit of damage isn't much to me." Jiyu Jiang'er put together his fists again, and smiled apologetically, "Please calm down, miss. On the Menluo Island, a shocking incident happened. A massive earthquake made a seemingly bottomless trench on the island. At the epicenter of the earthquake, a chunk of ice suddenly blasted up from the ground. It is only a tip of the iceberg, but the cold aura it's emitting is astonishing. There seems to be some mysterious signs floating around the tip, and no one knows what secrets it holds. I happened to be traveling nearby and thought to look into this matter. That's all I can tell you. There's no need for your compensation, just escort us onto the island." Xia Xinyan's brows slightly furrowed. She nodded at Shi Yang and walked towards that pointy end of the Dark Dawn, which was stuck into their iron ship. Moments later, Shi Yang followed Xia Xinyan onto the Jiyu family's ship, the Dark Dawn. On the deck of the ship were many indentations. In the indentations there were pieces of colorful and bright rocks, and there seemed to be some sort of power source for the Dark Dawn. Just as they were on board, 4 vigorous auras emitted from the 4 corners of the ship. It seemed to be some sort of attack that could automatically be triggered whenever someone boarded the ship. Jiyu Jianga casually smiled, and shouted, "Let's go." That aggressive power disappeared, as if it never existed. "I'll escort you guys to the island." Jiyu Jianga's attitude was friendly. He nodded towards Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan and said, "Please hold tight, I'm going to start the ship now." Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan's expressions were indifferent, they lightly nodded. Jiyu Jianga stomped one foot into a hexagram-shaped little seal. 6 different colored lights rushed out of the 6 points on that little seal. The 6 light beams gathered at one point and formed into a bright shining miniature ship. Jiyu Jianga waved his hand and the little ship shifted backward. The Dark Dawn moved along with it and sailed back a bit, then it changed direction and instantly rushed towards the harbor of Menluo Island. The miniature ship, formed by the 6 colored light beams, shook continuously. Under Jiyu Jianga's fiddling, it became bright and glistening. The Dark Dawn was like a shooting star. Its speed became faster and faster, and it went straight for the harbor. The short fat elder's expression slightly shifted. He spoke urgently, "Young master, pull back." Jiyu Jianga laughed, his big hand pressed down, like pressing on a little person. He immediately made that miniature ship stop shaking. Whoosh! The Dark Dawn suddenly stopped and steadily anchored in front of the harbor. "Fuck! Who's messing around? Wanna die?" On the harbor, a large shirtless man cursed out angrily. He was drenched by the splash and got very mad. After the man wiped off the water on his face and saw that the ship that made the splash was the Jiyu family's Dark Dawn, his expression immediately changed. He hurriedly apologized and laughed awkwardly. I didn't know that this was the Jiyu family's Dark Dawn. Please forgive me. It's all right." Jiyu Jianga waved his hand, and smiled at Xia Xinyan. He said, "Miss, we're here." "Okay." Xia Xinyan nodded, and said lightly, "Let's go." Shi Yang silently followed along. "Young master." After Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan left, that short fat elder pondered for a second, then said these two seemed to have been riding a yin-yang wonderland ship. This ship should be the one that was hijacked. Both the yin-yang wonderland and the corpse sect put out word that they would generously gift the one that captures the man and woman that hijacked the ship. "I know." Jiyu Jianga nodded, smiling. "If it weren't that the yin-yang wonderland and the corpse sect are both trying to find this ship, I wouldn't have crashed into it." "Then why did you let them go?" "These two's strength is not that high. It would be a piece of cake for us to capture them. If we gave them to the yin-yang wonderland and the corpse sect, those two sides would owe the Jiyu family a favor." "Isn't that a good deal?" the short fat elder asked in confusion. Jiyu Jianga shook his head. When they clearly knew you 4 were in the Nirvana realm, they still boarded the ship, meaning they obviously have nothing to fear. The moment they boarded, the 4 flows of sword energy shot out of the 4 corners, creating an aggressive atmosphere, but these two looked indifferent, and they ignored it. Clearly, they are no ordinary people. The elder thoughtfully nodded and said no more. "Let's go. We should get to the island too." The people from the magical wonderland, the Dongfang family, and the Heaven Lake Divine Land should have arrived at the destination by now. "We can't be left behind." Jiyu Jianga stretched, and a streak of sharp sword aura flashed behind his neck. Then, like a sharp sword, he flew out of the Dark Dawn and landed on the harbor. Poochie. The shirtless big man that made an insulting remark now had gashes of sword marks on his body. His eyes were popping out, and he fell on his back. Next to this big man, many warriors with superb capabilities were all silent. No one dared to say anything. They all lowered their heads and pretended they saw nothing. In a carriage pulled by a fire rhino, Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan sat face to face. At the head of the carriage, a dark-skinned man intently whipped the fire rhino, a concentrated look on his face. That Jiyu Jianga's attitude seems to be friendly. As a part of the outstanding generation of the Jiyu family, it's pretty unusual that he's so gentle. In the carriage, Shi Yang suddenly spoke after a long period of silence. "Friendly?" Gentle? Xia Xinyan shook her head and sneered, if this Jiyu Jianga can be called friendly and gentle, then there are no good people in the world. This guy specializes in schemes. In the Jiyu family, he is famous for being a vicious man. Compared to Beiming Shong, from the Beiming family, this guy is way more manipulative. Even when he kills people, that friendly and gentle smile is still on his face. No one can see a trace of hideousness or evil, but the people that have died by his hands amounts to 100. Shi Yang's expression changed. If I wasn't being aggressive and voluntarily boarded the ship, we wouldn't have left that easily. Xia Xinyan frowned, it is because I was dominating over him, unafraid of the Nirvana realm warriors behind him, that he felt fear, so he didn't act immediately. Or else, we would have been put in a bad situation. I understand now. Shi Yang's face was grim. He sneered, it seems that it won't go so smoothly for us along the way. If we meet that Jiyu Jianga next time, I'll be careful. You do need to be careful. Xia Xinyan's expression was serious. With your capabilities, you can kill an ordinary warrior at the second sky of the disaster realm, but, against Jiyu Jange, it's hard to say. His dragon-slaying sword was forged with the demon crystal of the level 8 demonic beast, the Hornless Fire Dragon. The Hornless Fire Dragon is a type of dragon with fiery characteristics. The dragon-slaying sword has an amazing fire ability. It can easily burn through flesh. Your Stage 2 petrification martial spirit is probably not enough to hold against it. Shi Yang's expression was also full of seriousness, but his eyes were filled with fighting intention. Xia Xinyan glanced at him and secretly nodded in her mind. No matter which figure this guy was against, he never knew of any fear. It would only stimulate his will to fight. He certainly was a warrior by nature. Wait until he reached the Yang family. When he obtains the immortal rebirth creed, who knows what kind of storms he will stir in the endless sea. The tip of an iceberg appeared through a crack in the earth. Did this Menluo island used to have icebergs? Shi Yang was silent for a moment, then he suddenly said. Menluo Island is a place of frequent volcanic eruptions. There are more than a dozen different-sized volcanoes on this island. Every volcano will spew lava every once in a while. Because of that, the Three Gods sect, the Jiyu family, and the Dongfang family never cared about this area. They let the few militant forces on the island take charge. Xia Xinyan explained. A land of volcanoes? Shi Yang was shocked. He questioned, then why would an iceberg suddenly appear? I don't know either. Normally, a land of volcanoes would never have any icebergs, but now one really did appear, and there seems to be some mysterious signs around it too. This is incredibly strange. Xia Xinyan was also perplexed, and she lightly shook her head. Interesting. No wonder all these forces came to join the fun. Dash. Chapter 136, Breaking the Constraint. Chapter 136, Breaking the Constraint. Sponsored by Richard O'Brien. Dash. At nightfall, red clouds filled the sky, and the earth was tinted red by the light of dusk. The ground was devastated. Bottomless ditches were spread everywhere, like sword wounds on one's body. Under the sun's fading light, the ground looked like it was covered with a layer of blood, which looked a little creepy. In the ditches, there were roots of many plants with the corpses of many demon beasts and humans. A light rotting odor was spreading from inside the ditches, giving off a nauseating smell. A carriage slowly stopped at a far end of this piece of land. We're here. The coachman turned back and looked into the carriage. He hesitated for a moment, and then said, I'll wait for you in this area. You should come back as soon as possible. I will not wait for long. The carriage door opened and Shi Yang poked his head out. He threw a little bag to the coachman, and smiled. Wait for 3 days. If we are not back in 3 days, then you can go back by yourself. Don't worry, I will pay you more when we return. I wouldn't make you wait for nothing. The coachman didn't answer immediately. He opened the little bag and carefully counted the crystal coins inside. Then he finally smiled and said, All right, I will wait for 3 days. If you don't come back after 3 days, I will leave by myself. Shi Yang and the veiled Xia Xinyan slowly walked out of the carriage. They didn't bother with the coachman and walked straight towards that area with all the bloody crevices. The land in that area was filled with bottomless ditches. The carriages wouldn't be able to go through. In the ditches, the corpses of demon beasts and humans were giving a strong odor, which was not something any ordinary person could handle. It was reasonable that the coachman didn't want to come. Shi Yang carefully walked forward. On the way, they encountered many warriors of different ranks. They were also traveling on foot. This place was originally a small town, but, due to the earthquake, all the houses collapsed and many people were buried alive. Some low-level demon beasts from the nearby mountains were also struck by the disaster, and became corpses in the ditches. Along the way, Shi Yang was quite indifferent, but Xia Xinyan was frowning the whole way. She covered her nose with her delicate hands. Clearly, she didn't like the smell here. There were ditches everywhere, so the two had to be careful while walking. They moved through the higher points, around the long deep ditches. Around them, 3 groups of warriors were also covering their noses and frowning. They observed their surroundings and carefully moved forward at the same time. The 3 groups of warriors had a few dozen people. Most were at the human and nascent realms, with a few being disaster realm warriors, but they were all of very old. Some were even white-haired. These people should be either Menluo Island warriors, or from some insignificant forces from the neighboring islands. They were not exceptional people. Within them, a few male warriors were lustfully glancing at Xia Xinyan while walking. There were also some that purposely dropped behind so they could stare at Xia Xinyan's alluring waist and butt, drooling all the while. In the beginning, Shi Yang didn't care much, but when he realized that many male warriors, who were originally in front of them, now were slowly dragging behind, he finally noticed this strange situation. Shi Yang's expression darkened. He quietly used his profound qi and yin qi to make a gravitational field, and released it upon them. Thump! A 50-year-old man, whose eyes were the most perverted, suddenly stumbled and dropped straight down into a ditch, making direct contact with the rotting corpses in the bottom. Thump! Thump! More warriors with impure thoughts in their eyes fell into the ditches, one after the other, making close contact with the demon beast corpses and the human corpses. Their bodies were covered with rotting odors. Soon, warriors from the surrounding groups all realized this strange phenomenon. Among those people, there were some skilled cultivators, but not even they could figure out what was going on. Thus, when they looked at Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan again, their eyes were filled with more fear and respect. Those male warriors all stopped the lustful looks on their faces, and put on serious faces. They no longer dared to stare at Xia Xinyan. "Oh you!" Xia Xinyan lightly shook her head. She said in frustration, "I'm already used to these looks. If I was like you and attacked everyone that kept looking at me, wouldn't I die from exhaustion? How dare they look at my girl?" Shi Yang scowled. He turned around and threw a vicious glare at those people, then he snorted coldly, "I am being merciful by not taking their lives. Who's your girl?" This gave Xia Xinyan a real headache. She rolled her eyes. Shi Yang grinned and didn't answer. Xia Xinyan was frustrated, but she could do nothing about Shi Yang's rascally nature, so she started to ignore him and continued walking forward. After 2 hours, the two arrived at a crowded, noisy place. Here the ditches were so deep, it was as if they were bottomless, each being like a giant pit. They were dark and deep, and filled with countless corpses. A prism-shaped iceberg poked out of one of the deep ditches, like a sharp sword. It was 2,000 feet tall, and pointed straight up into the sky. A chilling icy energy was spreading out from that iceberg. The closer you came to it, the cooler it felt. Some lower-ranked warriors could only watch from afar, as they couldn't dare to get too close to the iceberg. The dozens of well-dressed warriors from the magical wonderland, the Dongfang family, and the Heaven Lake Divine Land were gathering around 1,000 meters away from the iceberg. Their expressions were confused, and they were whispering to each other, as if quietly discussing something. Xia Xinyan suddenly stopped. Shi Yang also stopped after her. At 1,500 meters from the iceberg, they gazed up to the sky above. The iceberg was wreathed with a light cold fog. Under the setting sun's light, it gave off a bloody, red light. Inside the glistening iceberg, there were many strange signs hovering. Those signs seemed to come from some secret spells, and they were swirling with bright colors and lights, and giving faint energy fluctuations. This was only the tip of the iceberg. A bigger block of ice was hidden more deeply in the ground. It was unknown as to how big it was. Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan furrowed their brows while looking at the iceberg, then they secretly looked at the three groups of people closest to the iceberg. Their expressions were serious. The Sky Realm Elder Chen Duo, from the Magical Wonderland, the Saintess Chu Yanqing, from the Heaven Lake Divine Land, and Dongfang He, from the Dongfang family. Xia Xinyan pointed towards the three groups of people present there, and explained quietly about the backgrounds of those three people. Following Xia Xinyan's finger, Shi Yang quietly looked towards the three groups of people. The Magical Wonderland's Sky Realm Elder Chen Duo was a big chubby guy. He had a beaming smile and tiny eyes. His face was full of fat, and the fat on his face shook and quivered as he talked. Beside him, there were 12 Magical Wonderland warriors. Their ranks include those who were at the nascent to Nirvana realms. The Saintess from the Heaven Lake Divine Land wore a white palace dress. The hem of the dress was decorated with beautiful triangular jade pieces. Her figure was enchanting and her skin was fair as snow. Although her face looked quite normal, her temperament was deep and profound, making her hard to figure out. Beside her, there were also 7 Heaven Lake Divine Land warriors. They were all beautiful women. 5 were in the Earth realm and 2 were in the Nirvana realm. Dongfang He had a green robe on and his expression was cold. He was in the 3rd sky of Nirvana realm, and behind him stood 12 warriors. One of them was an old lady that looked extremely young and lively. There was not a single wrinkle on her skin, and she was actually in the Sky Realm. The Magical Wonderland, the Heaven Lake Divine Land, and the Dongfang family didn't specifically send people here. They were all active in the nearby seas, and suddenly heard of the strange phenomenon on the island and, thus, they hurried here. Saintess. Doesn't look that great. After listening to her explanation, Shi Yang's twitched his lips. You bastard. Xia Xinyan laughed out loud. All you do is look at the bodies of women. Between you and the men you pushed into the ditches, there is, essentially, no difference. Shi Yang grinned. Chu Yanqing is a very famous beauty in the Endless Sea. It's just that she usually wears a thin mask, and rarely shows her true face. A saintess from the Heaven Lake Divine Land can never fall in love with a man in their lifetime, so the saintesses never show their true faces in front of men. Don't expect to ever see her true face. Xia Xinyan quietly spoke. Never to fall in love with a man in their lifetime? Shi Yang shook his head. Bullshit Divine Land. Xia Xinyan rolled her eyes at him and stopped explaining. There are so many people. Jiyu Jianga's gentle voice came from behind. Soon, Jiyu Jianga and the 4 Nirvana realm warriors from the Jiyu family crossed through the scattered warriors and approached the iceberg. When he arrived at 1,000 meters away from the iceberg, along with the Magical Wonderland, the Dongfang family, and the Heaven Lake Divine Land, they separated into 4 groups, each standing beside the iceberg. Jianga, you're here too? Dongfang He glanced at him, and forced a smile onto his cold face. Are there any others? Greetings, Uncle He. Jiyu Jianga bowed. He smiled. No, it's just us. I just happened to be at Gyroscope Island, and I heard something strange happened here, so I came to see. Uncle He, you were here early. Did you discover anything? Many surrounding warriors, once they heard Jiyu Jianga, all focused towards Dongfang He. The mysterious signs in the iceberg flowed with a constraining power. Our 3 sides already attacked the constraint together many times, but none of us has succeeded. Dongfang He shook his head. The constraining power is very unusual. We tried a couple of times and the constraining power finally seems to be loosening. Soon, we will try again. He, you should contribute too. My pleasure. Jiyu Jianga smilingly nodded. Then, Jiyu Jianga scanned the crowd, and quickly found Xia Xinyan and Shi Yang. Jiyu Jianga's eyes brightened. He smiled and nodded towards Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan, as a greeting. Shi Yang smiled casually, and nodded back. Xia Xinyan's expression was indifferent, as if she didn't see him. She remained unmoved. Jiyu Jianga didn't seem to mind, and he still kept that warm smile on his face. We should keep trying. Chen Duo suddenly spoke, his chubby face filled with a wry smile. The sooner we break the secret of the iceberg, the sooner we can report back, or else, if we wait until more forces come, even if we find something in the iceberg, it will become shared by more people. Don't you all agree? Although Chen Duo said it like that, his eyes only looked at Dongfang He, Chu Yanqing, and Jiyu Jianga. He didn't look at the warriors scattered 1,000 meters away. In his mind, if there really was a secret in the iceberg, no one else had the right to share it. All right. Dongfang He nodded. He spoke to the warriors behind him. Everyone just has to try their best later. Chu Yanqing, Jiyu Jianga, and all the rest nodded in agreement. Let's go. Once Chen Duo saw that these three sides agreed, without even looking at anyone else, a little silver hammer suddenly flew out of his sleeve. A deep, overwhelmingly heavy force came from that little silver hammer. The little silver hammer suddenly grew bigger in mid-air. Like a little silver mountain, it fiercely struck at the revealed tip of the iceberg. Dash. Chapter 137 Upheaval. Chapter 137 Upheaval. Seeing Chen Duo take action, the members of the Heaven Lake Divine Land, the Dongfang family, and the Jiyu family, all operated their treasures, producing many different lights, which all struck the iceberg. Chu Yanqing pointed out her finger, and, at once, the air turned into white light and fell from the sky. Jiyu Jianga yelled out, and a red long sword flew out from his neck. The red sword let out colorful light, and a 100-long dragon appeared, which was covered with fiery scales. Bang, bang, bang. Many treasures and martial skills fell and struck the iceberg, producing great thunderous sounds. One after another, strange signs glimmered inside the iceberg and rippled with extreme coldness. Many warriors were so frightened that they began to operate their profound qi to defend against the old air. However, the strange signs and ripples inside the iceberg put off a seemingly bright and sunny light. The warriors of the magical wonderland, the Dongfang family, the Heaven Lake Divine Land, and the Jiyu family continued to strike the iceberg. Deafening noises came from Monroe Island, and the sky was filled with sparkling lights, reminiscent of fireworks. The iceberg stayed still, but from under the ground came terrible noises and tremors, which made the cracks, crevices, and ditches even deeper. Inside the iceberg, those strange red signs first sparkled, but then the sparks turned dim. Crystal ripples expanded and reached the warriors standing 1,500 meters away from the iceberg. They trembled and retreated. Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan looked rigid but stayed still. With his profound qi triggered and dark light shield activated, Shi Yang could defend against the cold air. It cracked more. Chen Duo cried with joy, and a huge silver light struck the iceberg. The warriors from the three powers triggered their energy and operated all sorts of treasures and martial skills, striking the iceberg. As all sorts of treasures flew in the sky, putting off sparkling light, more and more cracks were formed in the earth. All at once, the nearby volcanoes exploded and sprayed hot lava everywhere. Lava flew down from the sky and gushed into the ditches. Before long, the lava had begun filling the ditches. Bang, bang, bang. The earth howled and many warriors fell into the ditches. Not a single warrior who fell in escaped from the hot lava. Heart-rending screams came every now and then, as those warriors ran in all directions. More warriors fell into the lava after the quake. In a mere few seconds, dozens of warriors had died. Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan were also looking for a place to set their feet. Xia Xinyan used one hand to catch Shi Yang, prepared to operate her reincarnation martial spirit at any time. Around them, 7 warriors fell to the gully and were devoured by the lava. Their profound qi flew out of the gully into Shi Yang's meridians. Shi Yang was so thrilled and excited, he couldn't help giggling. Stop! Stop! We are leaving right away. Please, spare us. Stop striking the iceberg, let us leave. The warriors around them screamed and pleaded. The 4 powers kept striking the iceberg, thus the earth cracked and lava gushed out. The earth wouldn't stop shaking if they didn't stop striking, and more warriors would fall into the gully. The nearby warriors pleaded. All they wanted to do was to leave. However, those experts never cared about these warriors' lives. None of the experts of the 4 powers were hurt. Shi Yang now realized the cruelty of the endless sea. As for the 15 powers, people's lives were nothing. They would do anything to achieve their desires. More and more warriors screamed and died in the lava. Some of the warriors, like Xia Xinyan and Shi Yang, were lucky enough to escape the lava. Regardless of the cries, the 4 power kept attacking the iceberg. Inside the iceberg, the strange signs lost their light, while the ripples in the iceberg got colder and colder. Even Shi Yang needed to consume a huge amount of energy to prevent his limbs from getting stiff. The warriors who were not hurt before were now hit by the ripples and fell into the lava as well. Half of the onlooking warriors fell into the gully and died with miserable cries. Shi Yang absorbed another 5 human and nascent realm warriors' profound qi, so the negative energy filled his meridians, and his bloodthirst started to raise its ugly head. Let's find somewhere where there are less people. Shi Yang motioned to Xia Xinyan and began to move. Xia Xinyan still knew nothing about the mysterious martial spirit. When Shi Yang cured her reincarnation martial spirit with the magical energy, he said it was from the immortal martial spirit. Xia Xinyan was confused, but she didn't ask anymore. Okay. Xia Xinyan didn't ask why he had to find a place with less people. Although Shi Yang wanted their profound qi so much, the amount which he could bear was still quite limited, as too much negative energy would kill him. But unfortunately, he couldn't control how much he could absorb. Thus, he would do his best to stop once he felt pain in his meridians. Too much profound qi would explode his meridians. He didn't know what would happen to him then. Therefore, he had to absorb a lot, but not too much, negative energy. The great explosions faded away. Those experts of the 4 powers did not try to save anyone, but turned away, tired. The series of intensive strikes had tired them. They were worried that after the secret in the iceberg was revealed, they would lose the chance to get anything due to lack of energy from constant attacks. They stopped the strikes, and the ripples in the iceberg also disappeared. The strange signs also quieted down. Without the strikes, the earth turned peaceful. The surviving warriors looked at the 4 powers with hatred, and, in the end, left, one by one. A few dozen confident warriors didn't leave, but, instead, looked to the iceberg with rigid faces. Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan were among them. The sun had disappeared, and the moon had started to rise. That night, the warriors from the 4 powers were resting around the iceberg. Far away, the group of Xia Xinyan and Shi Yang were training. Deep into the night, Shi Yang was gritting his teeth, his facial expressions were hideous. Can you make it? Xia Xinyan asked tentatively. It was 3 miles from the iceberg, far from the 4 powers and those warriors from the minor powers. Therefore, Shi Yang's abnormity didn't draw anyone's attention. No problem. Shi Yang breathed heavily and waved, "Stay away from me. Your existence is my greatest woe. Don't let me see you, or I will feel more pain." Xia Xinyan was surprised and smiled. "Am I so attractive to you?" Shi Yang mourned and yelled, "Xinyan, don't make joke with me now. I'm afraid I will do bad thing to you. You are too charming." Xia Xinyan's mouth quivered as she left happily. And her gentle voice flew over, "Concentrate on recovering, I will keep you safe." Shi Yang took a deep breath and closed his eyes. The negative power was forcefully triggered by him. Wisps of white smoke appeared from his skin and combined with all sorts of negative energies. Under the continuous stimulation, his negative energy was triggered in his meridians and gushed to his blood veins. "Howl!" Shi Yang yelled out, his teeth clenched. Bearing the severe pain, he took out the negative energy and pushed it into his blood. His blood was on fire, and his body was boiling. With a hideous face, some white smoke congealed and clung on his skin. He was practicing the second sky of rampage. The death-filled area around the iceberg was cold and gruesome. Crystal ripples unexpectedly expanded without anyone striking it. The cold air was several times more intensive than it was during the day. Chapter 138 Fusion. Chapter 138 Fusion. Late at night. The iceberg was giving out an icy air. The white ripples, propagating from the iceberg, were chilling the surrounding area. 1,000 meters away from the iceberg, The warriors from the 4 big groups woke up, in surprise, and gazed at the iceberg in melancholy. Several low-level warriors moved out, away from the iceberg, at their seniors' gestures. The warriors remaining near the iceberg were all either at higher realms or had rare treasures. Many vagabond warriors, far away from the iceberg, also noticed this anomaly. All of them were looking at the iceberg in excitement, whereas the low-level warriors moved farther away as the cold atmosphere became more dense. Suddenly, Xia Xinyan appeared and stood 3 meters from Shiyang. Xia Xinyan's sexy figure was shining with a greenish light. The greenish light was shining in direct opposition of the cold air. Xia Xinyan thought of something and frowned, looking at Shiyang in surprise. Far away, the experts from the 4 big groups were all watching the iceberg in wonder. No one was striking the iceberg this time, but the iceberg was still emitting colder and colder air. Was it fighting back? Shoo! Suddenly, crystalline light erupted from the iceberg, looking like thousands of arrows. The crystalline light was even colder than those ripples. Warriors from the 4 big groups were suddenly thrown into a panic, as they struggled against the crystalline sparks. Those warriors who were slow were all turned into ice statues after being struck by the crystalline light. Xia Xinyan was astonished. Her hands shimmered as she produced strange seals, in the form of green lotuses. As the crystalline light flew towards Shiyang, Xia Xinyan would throw out green lotuses toward it. Shiyang had his eyes closed, and was still cultivating. Inside his body, the negative energy was attacking his blood like a sharp weapon. As his blood boiled, Shiyang's whole body was shaking due to the immense negative aura. The thought of training in the second sky of Rampage, when his meridians were undergoing changes due to the negative energy, had suddenly come into Shiyang's mind, and this was his first attempt. To train in the second sky of Rampage while his meridians were purifying the negative energy. This was what dawned on him, and this was his first try. While he was on the iron ship, Shiyang had repeatedly practiced the second sky of Rampage, trying to fuse the negative energy in his blood. But all of his attempts ended in failure. Just one time, when he was on the brink of losing his consciousness, the negative energy had suddenly moved, and was about to fuse with his blood. After pondering for a long time, Shiyang reached the conclusion that the negative energy could be fused with his blood only when the energy was about to be purified. Later, Shiyang tried many times to implement his thoughts, but was still unable to achieve success. Shiyang knew he was correct, so he tried to achieve his thoughts till at the verge of losing his consciousness. All the 720 meridians in his body were under tremendous pressure, as the negative energy slowly his mind. The idea of fusing the negative energy with his blood was deeply engraved in his mind. Even at that moment, he was still trying to fuse the negative energy in his blood. His blood was boiling, and all of his bones were under massive strain. Shiyang shouted in a low voice, straining to achieve success, but the negative energy and his blood were still in conflict. The cold ripples were quietly wrapping around Shiyang. Cold air was diffusing through his body and seeping into his veins, bones, and flesh. Shiyang had no time to protect against the cold air with his profound qi, as he was still immersed in merging the negative energy with his blood. His body was trembling a lot. The cold air was continuously entering Shiyang's body, nearly turning him into an ice statue. Xia Xinyan was very anxious when looking at Shiyang, wondering whether to help him against the cold air. More and more ice was gathering around Shiyang due to the surrounding cold air. Even Xia Xinyan, who was at the Earth realm, felt her profound qi slowing down. Shiyang was stone stiff. It was as if the ripples emerging out of the iceberg had found something interesting, and were gushing toward Shiyang from all directions. Ka. While Shiyang was trembling from the cold, ice was rapidly covering his whole body. Xia Xinyan's expression changed as she sensed a dense cold air in Shiyang, which was as strong as Beiming Shong's polar icefire martial spirit. Xia Xinyan stopped hesitating, intending to drive out the cold air from Shiyang. At that moment, Shiyang's meridians suddenly glittered. His 720 meridians produced light all at once. Shiyang's body was now like a starry sky. Xia Xinyan was totally shocked. The next moment, 720 wisps of odd energy went into Shiyang's body. The odd energy in Shi Yang fused with the negative energy and gushed into his blood veins. Howl! Shi Yang was in pain, and he bellowed and rolled on the ground. Xia Xinyan was getting anxious, as she didn't know what to do. Shi Yang, she bent down and whispered, "What can I do to help you? Answer me." Xia Xinyan was incredibly anxious. "I'm okay. Don't worry about me," Shi Yang said in a tremble. The ice on him melted quickly and the cold air slowly disappeared. Xia Xinyan didn't know what was happening with Shi Yang, but she was still on guard. Bang bang bang. At a distance, the people from the 4 big groups had begun another round of strikes. But the strange symbols surrounding the iceberg once again shone in the light, defending the iceberg from their barrage. Shi Yang bellowed for half an hour, then lay quietly on the ground. "Shi Yang, what are you training in? I've never seen anyone in such a pain while training." "Shi Yang, stop it. Stop whatever you are training in. Train in something else, I can provide." Xia Xinyan was very sad as she squatted beside Shi Yang, and whispered her advice. Shi Yang didn't reply, as if in a deep sleep. Xia Xinyan stayed beside Shi Yang and covered him in a green light, supporting his body so that he wouldn't fall into one of the ditches. The sky was bright. As the sun rose, the iceberg once again became quiet, and the ripples stopped spreading. People from the 4 big groups were covered in sweat, but were all still smiling in excitement. The light emitted by the symbols around the iceberg had become dim. All of them thought that the strange symbols had lost their power. At the thought of what could be hiding inside the iceberg, everyone was ecstatic. Shi Yang woke up slowly, with a tired and pale face, though his eyes were full of excitement. He was correct in his hypothesis. When his meridians were purifying the negative energy, he had entered a crazy state. In that state, he had lost all of his reason and wanted to do all sorts of bad things. And that period was the best time to fuse the negative energy with his blood. At night, all that strange energy went into the blood. With help from that strange energy, the negative energy had immediately started fusing with his blood. The strange power seemed to have changed his blood and made it accept the negative energy. With a pale face, Shi Yang struggled to sit and took a deep breath, trying to operate the negative energy. The negative energy once again started fusing with his blood, this time without any issues. His blood was boiling, as if on fire. He could feel that his strength had greatly increased. A strong bloodthirst overwhelmed his body. Shi Yang was stunned as he realized that the negative energy had turned icy, but his body was still unaffected. His body seemed to have adapted to the cold air. Edited by Jimmy and Eli. Chapter 139, Site Clearing. Chapter 139, Site Clearing. Cold energies were entering into my body while I was training. Shi Yang frowned and looked at Xia Xinyan. Yes, a lot of them. Xia Xinyan elaborated the strange thing that had happened to him. Shi Yang was shocked. When the strange cold energy entered his blood, it not only fused with his blood, but also made the negative energy fuse with his blood. It also adapted him to the surrounding cold air and cold energy. So was it good or a bad thing? Shi Yang's expressions were rapidly changing. Stop training with that martial skill. Xia Xinyan paused and continued, I feel that this martial skill is too vicious. Though it's quite powerful, its adverse effects are also frightening. You will find many interesting martial skills when you get to the Yang family. You won't have to suffer such pain again. On the iron ship of the Yin-Yang Wonderland, Xia Xinyan had already seen that the martial skill Shi Yang was practicing was very strange. Now, as she saw Shi Yang suffering from such tremendous pain, she started believing it to be a vicious practice. She tried persuading Shi Yang to change his ways. I can handle it. Shi Yang thought and replied with an indifferent tone. It was really strange that whenever he trained in Rampage, he had to suffer unimaginable pain every time. However, the gain in strength after each practice made him hesitate. This mysterious martial spirit produced a type of negative energy that enabled him to jump through cultivation realms, in terms of combat power. He couldn't resist it. Xia Xinyan sighed to herself as she realized that Shi Yang wouldn't listen to her. She knew Shi Yang to be strong and untamable, so she stopped trying to persuade him. The iceberg is going to explode in, At most, 2 days. Its power has nearly dried up. We don't know what will happen then, so we must be careful. Okay, I got it. Shi Yang nodded and thought for a while, then smiled. Thank you for protecting me. Xia Xinyan gave a brief smile. You have treated me well, it makes sense that I should return the favor. Shi Yang beamed and giggled. I may be heartless to others, but to you, I'm quite different. Xia Xinyan was a little happy as she rolled eyes at Shi Yang, smiling, glib. Shi Yang grinned. At noontime. After some recovery, the experts from the 4 big groups were all ready to make trouble again. After discussing amongst themselves for a while, Dongfang he came to the front, with an icy face, and spoke in a cold voice, You vagabond warriors, leave now. There will be an even greater earthquake soon. If you don't want to die, then leave now. Beside Dongfang he, the other warriors from the Dongfang family were all gazing at the freeloaders with murderous expressions. Jiyu Jianga cupped his hands and smiled, saying to them, Everybody, it is really dangerous here. For the sake of your own lives, please leave now. You have all reached your current realms after struggling throughout all these years. Don't waste it on something worthless. 4 Nirvana realm warriors were standing at the side of Jiyu Jianga, with rigid faces. They are driving us away. Xia Xinyan said, with some anger in her voice, these 4 big groups want to share all the treasures amongst themselves. They know that the iceberg shall break soon, and so, before that happens, they want to clear the site so that they don't have to share with anyone else. Shi Yang, with a rigid face, kept looking at those people. Chen Duo from the magical wonderland was the next one to speak. With a big smile he said, Everybody, it's already enough that you were able to watch everything till now. Please evacuate, this is your last chance. Though what he said could be said to be considerate, his eyes were clearly saying something else, a threat. Chu Yanqing, from the Heaven Lake Divine Land, was silent, and in a meditative posture, as she was still recovering from some injuries. The members of the Heaven Lake Divine Land were observing everything with cold faces. There were still a few warriors, some 1,500 meters away from the iceberg, showing their unwillingness and anger, but they said nothing. After a short period of silence, those people started leaving the area, sighing heavily and cursing. You get lost too. Dongfang his scorching eyes fell on Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan, and he sneered, Get lost right away if you want to live, or I will take your lives before the iceberg shatters. Sigh, Jiyu Jianga sighed, smiled bitterly at Xia Xinyan and Shi Yang, and shook his head, It's not that we want to drive you away, it's for your own safety's sake. So leave as soon as possible. Let's go. Controlling her indignation, Xia Xinyan pulled Shi Yang's coat and walked away silently. Shi Yang kept silent, but his face was gloomy. Stay away from me. You shall yourself be responsible for whatever happens, should I see the 2 of you again. Dongfang he stared at their backs and threatened. Uncle he, what are you doing? They are probably the 2 who robbed the ship of the Yin-Yang Wonderland. After Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan's figures disappeared, Jiyu Jianga frowned. The corpse sect and the Yin-Yang Wonderland had promised that whoever catches those 2 will be very well rewarded. Really? Dongfang he was surprised before he grunted, Leave them alone for now. After this iceberg has been dealt with, let's catch them as we leave. Though we are not close to the corpse sect and the Yin-Yang Wonderland, we would still help them, considering the good reward. Same here. Jiyu Jianga grinned, That woman is quite audacious, maybe she has something in her hand. But, since Uncle he is with us, they can't fly away. Before we hand them to the Yin-Yang Wonderland, I want to talk with that woman. Jiyu Jianga's were glistening in lust. Jianga, you're so naughty. Dongfang he beamed, but showed no concerns. That gorgeous lady has really a hot figure. It's okay with me if you play with her, but you can't be serious about it. You are engaged to Xiao Qiu, and if she finds out about this, I can't do anything to help you. Stop kidding me, Uncle he. You know me. Jiyu Jianga smiled in embarrassment. I am reminding you because I know you too well. Dongfang he showed a fake smile. Jiyu Jianga cupped his hands in front of his chest and assured, I know Uncle he cares about me. Don't worry, I won't go too far. Dongfang he nodded. The 2 stopped in a ditch, some 3,000 meters away from the iceberg. They could only see a small part of the iceberg. Shi Yang's eyes were filled with a cold anger. Pissed. Xia Xinyan glanced at him. The four big groups are really aggressive. Shi Yang nodded and sneered. As the secret of the iceberg is going to be revealed soon, they want to clear the area so that everybody else will stay away from it. We went all the way for nothing. Aggressive? Xia Xinyan beamed. Your young family has done so many things that are even more aggressive. If the three Shura kings of your family were here today, those people wouldn't get a say in anything. Hee, your young family alone is enough to drive these four powers away altogether. Is the young family really so bossy? Shi Yang replied in surprise. You will know soon. Xia Xinyan nodded. If the young family experts were here, they would have cleared the site even before attacking the iceberg. Only those who could survive a hit from the experts from the young family would have a chance to share in the secrets of the iceberg with them. They would torture the four powers first, then only, possibly, allow them to join in. Is that enough bossy for you or not? Is the young family one of the top powers among the 15 powers in the Endless Sea? Definitely. It could be ranked number 3 or number 2. Xia Xinyan said in a heavy tone. Didn't the King Yang Qing step into the spirit realm 10 years ago? You said that the master of the corpse sect and the queen of sky and king of earth of the yin-yang wonderland had also stepped into the spirit realm long ago. They were apparently much earlier than King Yang Qing. Hee. You will learn all the details as soon as you get back to the Yang family. Actually, though as one of your allies, I don't know much of the Yang family. The Yang family is pretty good at keeping secrets. You will know how capable your family is when you get there. Bang bang bang. Just then, a thunderous noise came from the direction of the iceberg. The sky was filled with dazzling lights, and all sorts of treasures fell upon the iceberg, striking deeply into it. After a period of serenity, the experts from the four powers struck again. From a long distance away, Shi Yang could only see a few of the mysterious symbols on the iceberg, which were becoming dimmer and dimmer, reaching the brink of not existing at all. They have started again. Xia Xinyan spoke in a serious tone. Let's not go near them, or they will immediately attack us. Okay. Shi Yang nodded. Deafening sounds ceaselessly came from the iceberg. The latter was producing more crystalline ripples with cold energy. Even at a distance of 3,000 meters, Shi Yang could still feel the increasing chill. More and more strings of light gathered around the iceberg, and, gradually, those mysterious symbols began to shimmer. Finally, one after another, these mysterious symbols started exploded on the iceberg. The iceberg, of which just a mere tip was visible, had many cracks appearing on it. More crystalline ripples and cold lights shot out from it, make the crowd quite busy. Ka. From inside the iceberg, a huge explosion erupted, while a stream of freezing air swept over the entire area. Edited by Jimmy and Eli. Chapter 140, Skyfire. Chapter 140, Skyfire. Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan, standing at a distance of about 3,000 meters, were solemnly watching the collapse of the iceberg. Some 10-odd warriors were also standing nearby, being very reluctant to retreat. Like Xue and Xia, they were also coerced by the four big groups to leave. However, a human most covets something that is unattainable. Even when there wasn't the slightest possibility, the people were still lingering around the area, with a hope to catch a glimpse of the iceberg's secrets. Boom! The sound of ice cracking gained in volume. Mountains collapsed and volcanoes, once again, erupted and started spewing lava, scorching the surrounding earth. The ground shattered into great chasms, some even having numerous icebergs, of which only the tips could be seen. The land seemed to be filled with countless icebergs. Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan were both rooted to the spot while looking at the distant volcano. The experts from the big groups were still bombarding the iceberg, using all possible means and martial arts to proceed. The white ripples from the iceberg increased in density, carrying frigid air that was 10 times colder than the surrounding area. The vibrations from the earthquakes had slowed down, but the ground was now completely covered with a blanket of cold air. Even the lava, which was deep within the chasms, was cooling. The ripples continued forming around the iceberg. The alarming cold air was still moving quickly, even though it was at such a low temperature. The trees, which were uprooted from the ground due to the earthquakes, all started turning into ice crystals, glittering all over on the ground. As the cold ripples propagated throughout the island with an alarming speed, similar scenes could be seen everywhere. No. Xia Xinyan was completely frightened. This coldness is too abnormal and far too heavy. I'd say it can even beat the polar ice flame martial art spirit of Beiming Shong. The cold air is gushing out from the iceberg. What could possibly be in that iceberg? Kroark. By now, the iceberg was almost completely destroyed. At the same time, numerous small ice cones started forming on the ground. In less than a minute, these cones turned into some strange type of ice demon beasts, which were shaped like leopard. These demons were each 3 to 5 meters long, their bodies all flashing in the bright sunlight, creating a very serene atmosphere. It did not take the beasts much time to gather into a group of more than 100. These ice demon beasts, though looking deprived of life, glinted blindingly under the sunlight, and would pounce down upon the humans nearby once they came into form. More frighteningly, these ice demon beasts were even 10 times colder than the air ripples. There was a nip in the air as each ice leopard leaped up, and the air seemed to freeze wherever they passed, making a strange muffled sound. The iceberg kept cracking open, with more and more ice demon beasts shooting out. Sunlight trembled on them, and among the warriors of the 4 powers there came noises of fierce fighting. The ravines also glittered with crystal light, as if the icebergs down there were also producing something. Finally, the cracking of the earth ended. By this time, 100,000 demon beasts had come into being, shooting up out of the ground like a swarm of locusts. Shi Yang stood watching the hair-raising scene dumbfounded. He cursed, "Where did these ice demon beasts come from? I can only sense strong cold air in them, and not the slightest sign of life. What the hell is going on? Move. There are too many of them for us to resist. The beasts carry with them an overpowering coldness. Let's run away," Xia Xinyan exclaimed after checking the beasts with her soul consciousness, her face grave and nervous. Far away, some warriors from the 4 powers were besieged by the ice demon beasts. Strangely enough, the attacks they launched did not seem to do anything, not even being strong enough to wound the beasts' bodies. Warriors began to be ripped to pieces by the beasts, their bodies a wretched sight to behold. Faced with such a horrible situation, Dongfang He, Chen Duo, Jiyu Jianga and the others were thrown into a panic. Who would care about the secrets of the iceberg at this moment? Thus the experts from the 4 big groups fled like the wind, one after another. Seeing that even the strong guys of the 4 powers had chosen to run for their lives, there was no ground for Shi Yang to linger. Therefore, in a great haste, he retreated with Xia Xinyan. The ice demon beasts did not only look like leopards, they moved with the same agility and speed. Running wildly in this iceland, the beasts outran many warriors of the earth rank. The straggling warriors near Shi Yang, who had also stayed away from the iceberg, were now seized by terror, shrieking and running desperately. "It's the ice beast. The ice beast. I've seen them on an ancient scroll. These are 100% ice beasts controlled by the cold ice flame." Some distance away, an elder warrior shouted like crazy, his face covered with terror. At the 3rd sky of Disaster Realm, he seemed more intent on shouting rather than running, and the gap between him and the leopard beasts quickly shortened. Soon his figure was lost in a sea of ice beasts. Bitter cries reverberated in the sky above the area where the elder warrior had shouted. Shi Yang felt his heart throb. His face dropped, and he hastened his steps. The name of the ice beasts registered something in Xia Xinyan's mind, and her delicate body giving a shudder that compounded the hint of terror just crossing her eyes. Frightened, she cried out, "Follow me, Shi Yang, quickly." He obeyed without hesitation. Suddenly, several forms whizzed past above their heads. Shi Yang looked up, almost by reflex, and found that the high-ranking warriors of the 4 powers were flying towards the gate of the Monroe Island in anguish, and, in their hands, they were clutching as many of their fellow men as possible. Jiyu Jianga was grabbed by the skyrank warrior of the Dongfang clan in one hand, and around his body colorful lights glowed. The moment Shi Yang raised his head, Jiyu was also looking down at him. Shi Yang snorted, and immediately bent his head, quickly catching up with Xia Xinyan. The girl stopped abruptly before a dead volcano, some 4 or 5,000 meters away from the icebergs. The green ring on her finger glittered, and out came a silver awl. Xia Xinyan instilled her profound qi into the small gadget. The awl emitted glaring silver lights that drilled hard into the stone of the dead volcano. In a minute, the rocks were crushed, and crumbs of stone were blown out into the air around them. A few moments later, a deep hole was dug out. Xia Xinyan went into the hole without hesitation and motioned for Shi Yang to come along. Shi Yang looked back, only to be threatened by the sight of countless ice beasts streaming to all directions like tides. He caught a glimpse of the dead corpses of many warriors that had been ripped open by the beasts. Meanwhile, some 10-odd ice beasts, without the slightest signs of life, were rushing to this cave with overwhelming coldness. Shi Yang immediately felt seized by the cold air, and, without further delay, he rushed into the cave. At this moment, Xia Xinyan was holding the silver awl, working at the stones ahead. She lifted planks of stones that had been drilled off, shouting at Shi Yang in a commanding tone of voice, "Come, give me a hand. Block up the hole." Without thinking, Shi Yang rushed over and picked up a few rocks the size of a millstone, and carried them to the entrance to the cave. Under their concerted efforts, over 10 rocks were carried out of the cave to the entrance. Then tightly they blocked the hole, leaving not a crack for light to come in. But the two dared not to have a respite. Amid Xia Xinyan's tender but powerful orders, Shi Yang carried on with the rocks. In a few minutes, the two of them made it to as deep as 30 meters into the cave, leaving 100 rocks behind them to block the entrance. Bang! Bang! Violent knocks came from the entrance, suggesting that the ice beasts had found their way to the cavern and were now trying to barge into it by force. However, the rocks that stood between the entrance to Xia and Shi's current spot amounted to at least 3,000, among them even the smallest was as big as a stone stool. With so many rocks, even the ice beasts found it a challenge to break through the entrance. However, these beasts did not abandon hope until half an hour later, when the booming noises at the entrance finally subsided. "I think we are safe for now." Wiping the sweat from her forehead, Xia Xinyan let out a soft sigh, and then uncovered her veil. The delicate cheeks were gleaming with a sheen of sweat. If it not had been for the luminous stone Xia Xinyan had with her, then, being this deep in the cave, the two would have been troubled by the lack of light. Xia Xinyan seemed fatigued. After storing the small awl away, she gasped a bit, then sat down on the ground, smiling bitterly. "We've really had a tough time. The ice beasts. That old guy shouted the name before he died. I saw you were surprised at that moment. Do you know anything about these beasts?" After seating himself next to the girl, Shi Yang asked with knitted eyebrows. Xia Xinyan nodded her head slowly, if not reluctantly, her face solemn and gloomy. "I think I finally know why this volcanic island has that iceberg." "Why?" "The ice. There's cold ice flame in it." "Cold ice flame?" Shi Yang's face was filled with confusion. Why is this flame so devastating? "The sky fire." Xia Xinyan took a deep breath and then went on to explain. "You should know about the 3 kinds of fire: sky, earth, and mortal, right?" "Sure. First, the mortal fire. We humans are born with it, and practically a kind of martial spirits. The polar ice flame martial spirit of the Beiming clan is an example. And then the earth fire. It's deep down in the volcanoes, a million years old, and it's a flame with frightening power, but no life. It can be used to make pills and weapons, absolutely horrible. And lastly, there's sky fire. It's a flame that has existed since the earth and the heavens were made, and is the most powerful of the 3 kinds, 'cause it's alive and has consciousness, a living wonder in the world. I heard that it can beat the mortal fire and earth fire in a blink of an eye, and carries a disastrous power." Shi Yang asked. "You are right." Xia Xinyan nodded, and cleared up. Among the 3 fires, the mortal fire is the least powerful, then comes the earth fire, followed by the most dreadful sky fire. "The iceberg. I guess it contains exactly 1 subdivision of the sky fire, the cold ice flame. The finest cold flame in the heavens and the earth. It is alive, and wherever it goes, the land will be covered with vast icebergs and irresistible cold air." "The cold ice flame?" Shi Yang was bemused. But why would this flame appear on this island? It's sealed here. Shia gave the question a thoughtful moment before she once again answered. It is said that strong warriors above the god rank can absorb the sky fire into the soul for their own use, thus obtaining an invincible power. However, it's easier said than done. The sky fire is not born for people to absorb. To integrate into your soul, you need not only a basic rank of god, but also every kind of the rarest materials. Above all, you need to captivate the sky fire first. I assume the difficulty is beyond our imagination. Has anyone ever succeeded in absorbing the sky fire? Well, during the tens of thousands of years of the Endless Sea's history, myriad legends have told about powerful warriors who had made an attempt at this grand ambition. But all of the stories ended up tragic, with the warriors being eaten up by the sky fire, their bodies and souls destroyed. One thing to remember, once the sky fire gets incorporated into the human soul, the owner's soul consciousness will be as powerful as the fire itself. Unconquerable among all the same level warriors. A warrior of the first sky of spirit god realm once absorbs the sky fire successfully can literally beat all powerful warriors of the second and third sky of the same realm. The latter does not stand a chance in front of him, and can even be killed in a second. Killed in a second? You heard it right, killed in a second. Shia Xinyan's eyes dropped, and her voice quivered. As the legend goes, once the soul consciousness absorbs the sky fire, it will undergo a mutation. But about mutation, nobody knows. The soul consciousness becomes extremely horrible, able to burn the opponents in a second. And to destroy one's spirit and soul? Only a breeze is needed. Then answer my previous question. Has anyone ever succeeded? Yes. In the record of the Endless Sea, there seemed to be two warriors who made it. One is at the spirit god realm, and the other true god realm. They carried the world before them, and all the same level warriors trembled at their feet. They dominated their realms. Then, the cold ice flame, how did it end up sealed under this volcano? Is it the result of someone trying to tame the flame with the volcano's energy? So someone tried to absorb the cold ice flame? Shi Yang blurted out excitedly. Should be. But it seemed that whoever did this must have failed. Shia Xinyan nodded. Edited by Jimmy, Vic, and Eli. Chapter 141, The Iceberg Seals the Island. Chapter 141, The Iceberg Seals the Island. Shi Yang and Shia Xinyan had been in the cave for 3 days. These past 3 days, even being inside the cave, they felt colder and colder as the temperature outside was becoming lower and lower. The cold ice flame was a type of sky fire. When the heavens and earth first came into existence, the cold ice flame already was around. It had its own consciousness, and it was an extremely special form of life in this world. The Menluo Island was covered with volcanoes. The God Realm warrior, in an effort to try to merge the cold ice flame into his sea of knowledge, used the volcanoes on Menluo Island to try and constrain it. But for some reason, he ultimately failed. The cold ice flame had been sealed ever since then. Those floating symbols, which they had seen inside the iceberg, were one of the constraints on the cold ice flame. After tens of thousands of years, the power of the seal had slowly declined. The cold ice flame continuously ate away at the constraint, and finally poked out from the bottom of the sea and appeared on Menluo Island. The people from the four forces wanted to obtain the secrets of the iceberg, so they kept bombarding and striking the iceberg. This made the already weakened constraining power even weaker, and ultimately let the cold ice flame escape. It formed into thousands of ice beasts, which were now roaming Menluo Island, making this land of volcanoes into a hell on earth. The cold ice flame was a sky fire. Unless a God Realm warrior came by, it would be very hard to seal a sky fire. Once the warriors from the four forces realized that it was a sky fire that hid in the iceberg, without hesitation, they immediately escaped from the iceberg, using their fastest speed to get off the island. The ice beasts were made from the cold energy of the cold ice flame. On Menluo Island, the ice beasts were always being empowered with a steady stream of the cold ice flame's cold energy. This cold energy made the ice beasts as hard as iron, and gave them incredibly fast reflexes. There was also a large quantity of these ice beasts, which made it impossible for the four forces to defend against them, so they had to retreat. Xia Xinyan knew about the power of the ice beasts. To prevent getting trampled by the ice beasts, she immediately dug out a cave and hid inside to avoid being attacked by the ice beasts. It had been 3 days. The cold energy outside slowly got stronger. Menluo Island had fallen completely silent, as if all the ice beasts had vanished from this place. Ice beasts are formed from the cold ice flame. After Menluo Island becomes lifeless, the power of the ice beasts would be reclaimed by the cold ice flame. According to the amount of time which has passed, there should be no more ice beasts on Menluo Island. Xia Xinyan furrowed her brows slightly, and pondered for a moment, then said, "We can go out and take a look, maybe we can find an opportunity to leave the island. Once the warriors from the four forces escape, they will definitely deliver the news about this place at once. By that time, there surely would be God Realm Masters, who covet for the cold ice flame, come to Menluo Island from all directions. Once the God Realm Masters are here, the Menluo Island would definitely become even more of a mess. It is definitely time for us to leave." Shi Yang nodded. After 4 days of recovery, and being under the effect of the immortal martial spirit, Shi Yang had returned to his peak physical state. After going through this disaster, Shi Yang's state of mind seemed to change again. On the verge of life and death, he gained more insight to life, and seemed to feel a breakthrough was coming. The disaster realm required one to go through different kinds of challenges in order to gain enough insight to break through and stepping into a new realm. While having enough vigorous profound chi, having insight was more important. Without enough understanding, even if there was enough profound chi, it would be hard to progress any further. This perilous event was actually highly beneficial to both him and Xia Xinyan. The two worked together to clear away the rocks blocking the cave, slowly approaching the cave exit. After a short while, the last few remaining rocks were moved aside, and the two walked out of the cave. Right after they got out of the cave, their faces immediately changed, and their expression changed into that of shock. Under the moonlight, the world of ice surrounding them glittered like glass. Everything had formed into thick layers of hard ice, and the ground was covered with a freezing layer of ice that was a couple of meters thick. Penetrating cold energy filled this world. The cold energy was like a white fog, slowly floating above the earth. The two were in a place covered with ice and snow, and there was not a spot where greenery could be seen. The entire Menluo Island had been turned upside down. The neighboring extinct volcanoes became ice mountains, standing tall, and dazzled brightly under the moonlight, giving them a dreamlike aura. In the far distance, all the warriors were preserved in their running poses. But they were frozen into ice sculptures, their deaths forever commemorated by the ice encasing them. Because of the existence of the cold ice flame, Menluo Island seemed to have turned into an ancient iceberg. Ice and frozen rocks were present everywhere. Spreading their consciousness out, they discovered there was not a single trace of life. The ice beasts also completely disappeared, turning into lifelike-looking ice sculptures. All the people on Menluo Island probably froze to death. This time, it's really hell on earth. Xia Xinyan sighed. The warriors of the four forces broke the constraints that sealed the cold ice flame because they wanted to know the secrets of the iceberg. In the end, they let the cold ice flame escape its seal and let the entirety of Menluo Island, and the people living in it, be sealed in the ice. It's truly sad. Shi Yang's expression was cold, and he lightly said, "I wonder how many warriors from the four forces escaped from this disaster. I really hope they also died under the cold ice flame. The Sky Realm Masters are extremely fast. The people they brought were probably able to escape the disaster. The Heaven Lake Divine World has many powerful secret treasures, so that Saintess Chu Yanqing and her group should have also been able to escape. But the unimportant people probably also died in Menluo Island. The ones who were not brought along by the Sky Realm Masters would have been very unlikely to stay alive if they didn't hide in a cave like we did." Crack, crack, crack. An extinct volcano a few thousand meters away suddenly cracked open. Beautiful figures slowly poked their heads out of the broken cave opening. The one in the lead was that saintess from the Heaven Lake Divine Land, Chu Yanqing. Behind Chu Yanqing, a row of beautiful women from the Heaven Lake Divine Land were all looked stunned. They were shocked by the bizarre changes to Menluo Island. Xia Xinyan frowned and quietly put her veil back on. It seems that we weren't the only smart ones. They should have also known about how to hide from the ice beasts, and they also have secret treasures that could instantly create a cave. I knew this woman wouldn't die easily. Chu Yanqing stood elegantly in the distance, her face was emotionless. She was wearing a snow-white palace gown, the look in her eyes was cold. She gazed 1,000 meters away at Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan, seeming curious as to how they managed to survive. Qi Yanqing gazed in their direction for a moment, then she quietly instructed the few beautiful women beside her. After that, Shi Yang saw 2 Earth Realm women slowly walking their way. These 2 women had arrogant expressions, and their fair faces were cold as ice, almost as icy as Menluo Island was at the moment. These 2 women looked to be about 30-something years old. They had long legs and were quite tall. They both had narrow eyes with thin eyebrows and hair down to their shoulders. With their thin waists, they took elegant little steps. The 2 women slightly raised their heads, their expressions were cold. After coming this way, one of the women said lightly, "Our saintess wishes to see you too. Follow us." Then, the 2 women only glanced indifferently at Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan, then they turned around arrogantly, as if getting greeted by Chu Yanqing was a blessing to them. Xia Xinyan's bright eyes were filled with rage, and she snorted quietly. Shi Yang slightly furrowed his brows, and said indifferently, "They are quite full of themselves, aren't they?" Those 2 women seemed to have heard noises behind them. Their narrow eyes were filled with anger, as they both turned around to look at Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan. The one that talked first shouted with a cold face, "What are you whispering about?" "Nothing." Xia Xinyan responded lightly. She pulled on Shi Yang's clothes, signaling him not to do or say anything. She slightly lowered her head, and dragged Shi Yang along with her. Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan followed the 2 women from Heaven Lake Divineland and soon arrived beside Chu Yanqing. Chu Yanqing's long hair was done up in a high bun, and her looks weren't outstanding. But those eyes were like clear water, giving people a chilly feeling. She stood there frowning, while she looked at Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan, then she said lightly, "When did you get out? Did you find anyone else on the island? Did you see any strange things?" Shi Yang composed himself, and shook his head, "We just got out too, and we know nothing about the situation on Menluo Island now." Chu Yanqing looked at Shi Yang deeply, she pondered for a moment, and then commanded, "You two, go take a look at where the iceberg is exposed. If you find anything, just come back and tell me, and I will give each of you a profound level weapon as a reward. Go." Where the iceberg was exposed, was where the cold ice flame was sealed. It was very likely that the cold ice flame was hiding deep underground. If they went to roam around that area and got discovered by the cold ice flame, they would be dead for sure. There would be no chance for them to turn the situation around. The people from the Heaven Lake Divineland didn't have the guts to take the risk and look for themselves, but wanted Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan to go check it out for them and most likely die. This was truly arrogant and extremely cruel. "Sorry, we managed to stay alive this long, and we don't want to go die." Shi Yang scowled, and shook his head firmly, "We will be leaving Menluo Island now. Unfortunately, we won't have the chance to get acquainted with your profound level weapons." Chu Yanqing furrowed her brows, slightly revealing her annoyance. "Boy, no matter what you want, you will have to go." A beautiful, curvy, large-breasted Nirvana realm woman, with a cold expression and icy cold eyes said, "If you don't go right now, then we will kill you right now." Shi Yang's face changed. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Piercing sounds came from the distance. A moment later, you could see Chen Duo alone, and that old woman from the Dongfang family holding Dongfang He in one hand and Jiyu Jianga in another. They quickly flew in from the outside of Menluo Island. Jiyu Jianga owned the dragon-slaying sword. The sword sealed the demon beast Hornless Fire Dragon, and the Hornless Fire Dragon was a fire demon beast, therefore it had a special restraining effect on cold things and icy environments. He had brought it along this time. This group included 4 people. Chen Duo and that old lady were both in the Sky Realm, Dongfang He was in the Nirvana Realm, and Jiyu Jianga was in the Disaster Realm. The four already sent out the news, and were waiting for aid to come. But they also worried that there would be changes in the cold ice flame and that there might be mysterious treasures in the iceberg. So after the ice beasts all disappeared, they came back out of greed. "Hey! Dongfang," he exclaimed, and instructed that old lady. The old lady landed with Dongfang He and Jiu Jianga, and stood beside Chu Yanqing. Chen Duo looked down, and also flew down from the sky, landing steadily behind Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan. "Zhao Rong, what is it?" Chen Duo landed. He glanced at that cold-faced beautiful woman from Heaven Lake Divineland that was threatening Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan, and asked lightly. "We wanted these two to go and take a look at the situation, but they don't seem to want to cooperate." When facing Chen Duo, Zhao Rong's expression was no longer cold and arrogant. Instead, she put up a flirty smile. "Well, I was just negotiating with them. I didn't know that you guys would come too." After Chen Duo and the rest heard her words, they simultaneously frowned, and looked at Shi Yang and Xia Xinyan unhappily. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.